He smells the failure before the alarms. In a concrete cell under halogen knives, a humming box, an anchor against bad infinities, drops a single note out of tune, and that wrongness tastes like old iron and new prayers. Hunger is memory trying to become history, and the farther sky beyond the box stinks of empires dying in cadence. He lays a rusted palm upon the machine's arithmetic, folding his pocket around its pulse, aligning dead stars with a green sea that hears. The world pops like a tooth, and he slips sideways into a cathedral sky. The breach opens over a shrine world where oceans of rooftops belong to the ecclesiarchy, and bells never stop. Gathalamor's Basilica Magna throws argent light into a bruise-coloured dawn as a cloud bank peels apart like wet canvas. Vox hymns falter. Cherub servitors whirl in confused spirals, incense trailing behind them like torn nerves. Somewhere far below, in stone older than law, a wall grows a human silhouette. He arrives soaked in quiet. Plaster hairline cracks along vaults ribbed with saints. The old man steps from fresco into the world, and the world answers by oxidizing around his feet. Brass railings blister. Candles go to gum. His grin shows in negative through a mask of dried pitch, the mouth of an ancient mine. Pilgrims flood. He smells the failure before the alarms. In a concrete cell under halogen knives, a humming box, an anchor against bad infinities, drops a single note out of tune, and that wrongness tastes like old iron and new prayers. Hunger is memory trying to become history, and the farther sky beyond the box stinks of empires dying in cadence. He lays a rusted palm upon the machine's arithmetic, folding his pocket around its pulse, aligning dead stars with a green sea that hears. The world pops like a tooth, and he slips sideways into a cathedral sky. The breach opens over a shrine world where oceans of rooftops belong to the ecclesiarchy, and bells never stop. Gathalamor's Basilica Magna throws argent light into a bruise-coloured dawn as a cloud bank peels apart like wet canvas. Vox hymns falter. Cherub servitors whirl in confused spirals, incense trailing behind them like torn nerves. Somewhere far below, in stone older than law, a wall grows. Hairline cracks along vaults ribbed with saints. The old man steps from fresco into the world, and the world answers by oxidizing around his feet. Brass railings blister. Candles go to gum. His grin shows in negative through a mask of dried pitch, the mouth of an ancient mine. Pilgrims flood the nave like shoals of cloth and prayer. A teenage sacristan steadies a censer too heavy for her wrists and tastes pepper in the air. She looks right at him and fails to see, because between blinks he uses the old trick. Become only the question people avoid asking. He watches her lips move through a creed about mercy and remembers her face for later. He always begins by learning how people beg. Alarms spin up from subcrypt vox boxes, a layered tone meant to cut through liturgy. Down in the arterials feeding the basilica, Arbites in black carapace armor shove through tides of citizens, shocked. Smells the failure before the alarms. In a concrete cell under halogen knives, a humming box, an anchor against bad infinities, drops a single note out of tune, and that wrongness tastes like old iron and new prayers. Hunger is memory trying to become history, and the farther sky beyond the box stinks of empires dying in cadence. He lays a rusted palm upon the machine's arithmetic, folding his pocket around its pulse, aligning dead stars with a green sea that hears. The world pops like a tooth, and he slips sideways into a cathedral sky. The breach opens over a shrine world where oceans of rooftops belong to the ecclesiarchy, and bells never stop. Gathalamor's Basilica Magna throws argent light into a bruise-coloured dawn as a cloud bank peels apart like wet canvas. Vox hymns falter. Cherub servitors whirl in confused spirals, incense trailing behind them like torn nerves. Somewhere far below, in stone older than law, a wall grows a human silhouette. He arrives soaked in quiet. Plaster hairline cracks along vaults ribbed with saints. The old man steps from fresco into the world, and the world answers by oxidizing around his feet. Brass railings blister. Candles go to gum. His grin shows in negative through a mask of dried pitch, the mouth of an ancient mine. Pilgrims flood the nave like shoals of cloth and prayer. A teenage sacristan steadies a censer too heavy for her wrists and tastes pepper in the air. She looks right at him and fails to see, because between blinks he uses the old trick. Become only the question people avoid asking. He watches her lips move through a creed about mercy and remembers her face for later. He always begins by learning how people beg. Alarms spin up from subcrypt vox boxes, a layered tone meant to cut through liturgy. Down in the arterials feeding the basilica, Arbites in black carapace armor shove through tides of citizens, shock mauls held high. On the picked feeds, feeding Lord Marshal Severin Holt's command dais, a brown smear blossoms across camera 9 and chews through the lens like rot chewing its own tongue. Holt swears by the throne, then remembers the servitor who had that tongue cut out today for less. He moves through stone the way maggots move through bread, a sure, blind patience. The old man slides into a confessional stall as a woman kneels to enumerate small lies and a large theft. "I am sorry," she whispers, and he is surprised to realize she is not speaking to him. A laugh scratches the back of his throat and dissolves into rust dust that powders her veil. He leaves before the priest opens the screen, because he hears something louder than guilt, a different kind of prayer coming. The cult is old news, even here. It grows under every city like roots probing for water. In the ossuary chapels of St. Cantius, robed figures with sleeves lacquered by dried sap kneel around a barrel filled with something that used to be soil. Their leader's mask is a pressed flower of bronze. He speaks the word garden the way a butcher says cut. When he raises a blade, his sleeve tears along a stitch, and a smell of orchard rot blooms. The old man steps out of the wall at the third kneeler's shoulder and lifts him by the spine, as if lifting a rope from a bucket. He's briefly a saint's shadow, then something's father. The kneeler hangs there and keeps hanging, time unspooling until tendons string like candy. A soft, delighted sound moves among the cultists, as if the room itself is giggling. They run after the second one comes apart. Some do not, because some always wait for salvation, and he has found that to be very efficient. The leader tries a prayer at him, a string of high Gothic verbs hammered to hold, but prayer hits him like chalk hits wet slate. He shows the leader the pocket, just a keyhole of it, and the keyhole is a corridor with no corners, and a floor that tilts every time you think of your feet. The leader goes in. The keyhole shuts. Sister Dialogus, Roswin of the Order of the Argent Shroud, arrives with a squad of bolter-armed sisters tracking incense and cordite. She sees a room of gnawed stone and bodies folded into wrongness, and in the middle of the wrongness, a peeling figure with a long smile. "Demon," she says, "because you call things what you can shoot." She draws her bolt pistol and fires a prayer. He lets the first bolt round sink to the waist in his chest before it detonates. When it does, it fills him with whispering shrapnel that has names. He steps back, his shape rippling like old varnish, then falls sideways into the wall. The room sours. Roswin tastes violent age on her tongue and thinks of her 8th birthday when she broke her father's watch to hear it stop. Above ground, The basilica's nave roars. Holt's orders drive PDF infantry into defensive lines around the main doors. Pilgrim lines break. The sacristan with the heavy censer keeps her hands steady because she learned once how not to shake during punishments, and the lesson holds. She sees black-robed penitents shedding robes as if skins, revealing infested flak vests and grenade harnesses beneath. Someone screams, "Nurgle," and the name fits the smell that climbs like a vine around the nave's ribs. The old man likes soldiers because their fear smells clean. He slides up into the nave through the cracked base of the pulpit, where a marble saint points at a book no one can read. He studies the space the way mice study kitchens. The religious geometry here makes angles he can use. A plague ogrin booms through the front doors like a lobbed truck and leaves chunks of sacred door in his fat. The ogrin's breath has flies living inside the warmth. He moves to meet it without touching the floor. He uses the old man's door trick, passing through a pillar to look at the ogrin's spine from the wrong side. His hand goes through fat and meat. The meat does not mind. He searches for parts that used to care about being alive, a bit of nerve, a bit of oath. When he finds something that still wants to be itself, he pulls it and the ogrin collapses, immense and sudden, like a building finally tired of its architect. The knave sees him properly then. Sisters train bolters. PDF steady their laser guns, then look at the laser guns, then at their hearts, then at the old man again. Holt sees the ogrin fall on his pick slate and says, "Emperor be praised," and means it in the way a drowning man means it when a new storm wind starts blowing in a different direction. Inquisitor Mylia Thane arrives as if stepping between frames, her rosette quiet under a cloak cut for travel and violence. "Hold," Thane says, and the word has a grip. Sisters hesitate. Holt does not. He has lived long enough to know you lie to death only once, and then not again. "Whatever that thing is," he says into Vox, "it just saved my line." He saved his line, yes, by removing one monster so he could eat in peace. The old man enjoys his own pragmatism because it tastes like other people's. He turns his attention to the cult grenadiers spilling from the transepts. They have the look of men who have discovered that they do not have to die like everyone else, which makes them eager to test the theory. He moves into the first one's jacket like fungus down a seam and pushes the pins out of 2 grenades with his tongue. The man comes apart into flower shapes. The blast kills 3 pilgrims who came to pray for a son at war and a wife who was not. The sacristan with the heavy censer does not scream. She swings her censer at a cultist in an untrained arc that connects with a satisfying bell sound and knocks out 3 of the man's teeth. She will remember that sound when she dies and be proud. "Name yourself," Thane says, stepping into the nave's new geometry, reading the old man like she reads a ritual gone accidentally right. He does not recognize authority except to decide how it breaks. A radiance opens around her like a disciplined bruise. A psyker acolyte behind her pins his eyelids with gloved fingers and murmurs in low Gothic to block visions out of habit. The old man watches him with interest. Things that burn differently taste different when they go out. The earth answers elsewhere. A warp wound opens above Gathalamor, 2 hours void flight away, where the Navy picket line sits in an orbit written once with gold, and now with teeth marks. The Say Death Guard strike cruiser slides out of unreality gut first. Oxblood sails rotten and studded with prayer bells that ring in vacuum. It vomits smaller ships like it cannot help itself. Vox traffic shakes. The name that leaves throats in a dozen command rooms is the Pestilent Choir. Holt's adjutant pushes him a slate. "Confirmed, my lord," she says. "Death Guard warband. Numbers unknown. Ground elements inbound by drop capsule. We are to hold Basilica Magna and the Pilgrim Quarter pending reinforcement from the Palatine Guard. All of that means they are coming here, and here means the old man's new kitchen. He watches as sisters form firing lines and ecclesiarchy priests upgrade their orations to fight songs. Thane glances once at a choir of boy singers who have nowhere to go and whose voices have not yet learned fear. She directs them to a side chapel, sealing the door after them with the Inquisition sign. When she turns back to the nave, she looks through the old man like he is a problem written too clearly, the kind you have to get wrong to learn anything. "Can you be bargained with?" she asks. She is not asking as someone who believes in bargains, but as someone who knows war is a conversation with knives. He does not speak out loud. The voice he uses arrives in the minds of those without helmets and claws at the inside of their names. It is the sound of varnish cracking on a child's toy, the moment you learn things break. "I can be fed," he says, which is the closest he comes to a promise. "I prefer the ones who beg." "Then you will eat the unclean first," Thane says, and her words do not have the usual softening that makes commands into lies. "And afterward, we will decide how you end." He likes her by reflex. People who plan to kill him taste like cities he intends to visit twice. He tilts his head and moves into the transept wall as first waves smash the basilica's steps from above. They come in bells of corroded iron, drop pods screaming as if loving their impact. The old man catches the shapes of 13 disease-locked Astartes in his hearing, each a furnace of self with a theology nailed across his face. Plague Marines crash into the nave like new pillars, and bolter fire turns plinths into chalky storms. Sisters of Battle answer with a hymn that transforms fear into math. The math says, "Fire, reload, fire." He materializes at the ankle of the first Plague Marine, who takes a step toward the choir. The ankle is a museum of wrong flesh. He slips his hand into it and turns his fingers into little stairs that lead somewhere no one wants. The Marine's weight becomes history. He topples into the transept, ceramite greaves carving gouges in the sacred floor. The old man presses, but rot presses back. The first taste of this new war hurts. Nurgle's gifts laugh at age. Decay can be love here, and that is strange to him. His pocket dimension lurches the instant he reaches for it to swallow the Marine. Something in it bubbles, a membrane flexing against pressure from a sea. It feels like the time a researcher pumped acid into his containment room, and he pretended to sleep while he learned patience. He drags the Marine partway in, and the Marine drags Plague out with him. He keeps his hands inside the Marine for a long, slow beat. The old man counts the scar beads under the ceramite like rivets on an old bridge. He learns a prayer that is a poem about mold. He swallows a handful of it and dislikes the aftertaste. He twists. The Marine stops being a person and becomes a cautionary arrangement of things that used to add up. A sister dies 3 paces away with her eyes open. She is surprised at how warm the floor is. Holt's line buckles and reforms. Thane measures the room in a surveyor's gaze and picks the exact spot where everything will turn awful if it is allowed to. She moves there and puts her back against a column as old as this city's bravest lie. "Hold," she says again, and mouths stop falling apart. The old man lets a little of his pocket leak, only a mouthful, because if he lets too much, his pocket will tear like diseased lace. The leak pours across flagstones as a thin sheen and stones behave as if remembering a tidal schedule they never had. The nearest cultists forget how to stand. 2 of them sink from the ankles and scream because sinking reminds the body of graves. The old man parts the sheen for the sacristan with the heavy censer without looking at her, because he wants her fear to age differently. She knows she is being spared. She looks toward him and realizes it is a mistake to feel grateful to a thing with that smile. She tightens her grip on the censer and steps past the place where a Feast of the Annunciation mosaic begins to melt like candy. "Forgive us," she says, and does not know to whom, then takes 3 boy singers by the sleeves and drags them toward the side chapel Thane sealed. On the steps outside, a bell breaks under a blown shell and sings as it dies. Plague Marines trade fire with sisters at ranges fit for throwing knives. Arbites sweep pilgrims toward choke points and make choices in the clear understanding that not all choices are good. Holt stands on a portable dais because Fable demands advantage. His adjutant dies at his side, and he forgets her name instantly out of survival, and later will hate himself in the quiet hours, if there are any. In the noise, the old man hears the same wrong note that brought him here, now hammered by bigger hands. There is a lattice under the basilica, Gathalamore's version of a holy anchor, a chorus of Geller relics singing a rule into the ground. "Do not let the damned in." The Death Guard's presence makes the lattice complain. The complaint is a second door, badly hung. He can use it. He dives. Down is not a direction for him, but it matters to everyone else, and he is polite when it suits him. He flows through ossuary stacks, where skulls watch him pass with the dignified horror of things that did not expect to be used again. He enters the anchor room like a stain in reverse, pulling color into himself until the room looks like a word on a page where they ran out of ink. Priests attend the lattice, old men with wrists chewed by the duty of turning pages. A young tech priest stands apart, red robes hitched up to keep grease off them. Mechadendrite tipped with a candle, because he was told light pleases machine spirits. He sees the old man entering by the route no one built and forgets his own name, then remembers everything else harder. "Presence," he says, and 10,000 years of data cathedral memory open in him, instructing terror. The old man examines the lattice. Its runes are holes for war to drain through. A machine spirit has been told it is a prayer, and in believing becomes one. He tastes the tune. Parts of it are close to the humming box behind halogen knives. He is careful not to feel the memory of that box, because care compromises appetite. He touches a sigil. Years fall off it. Age makes everything easier to bend. He bends it exactly wrong. The wrongness yawns like a ditch and meets the plague above with a directness uncharacteristic of doctrine. The basilica stops vibrating. Drop chimes across the quarter seize into silence like mice hearing a cat step onto tile. For a moment, the sacred geometry resets. The price comes immediately. His pocket groans. He feels a new kind of hunger scratch along its inset doors, like fingernails made from equations. The Imperium is not a place, but it acts like one, and it presses its curiosity against his little room with the interest most people reserve for their first bite of stolen fruit. He can hold the door for a while. He will have to feed more often to do it. He returns to the nave through a crack he makes in the anchor room door by deciding it is already there. He comes out under the pulpit again, stepping into a battlefield whose breaths are measured in bolter clicks and liturgy fragments. Holt feels the pressure lift and does not identify its cause, but uses it anyway. "Advance," he says. Sisters push 2 paces forward. A plague bell sings and shatters. Thane watches the old man emerge and does not blink. "You touched the lattice," she says. "Accusation and inventory." He rustles. "It was young," he says. "Now it remembers being older." "You broke it," she says. "I showed it a better story," he says, and likes how that sounds in her skull. He lets her see a keyhole of the pocket so she can understand. He is admitting a weakness without suffering from it. "Can you do that again?" Holt asks. He does not care what that is because he has learned the rule. If something gives you leverage, you apply it until it screams. "Once," the old man says. "Twice if I eat." He looks at the choir room door. Thane breaks his gaze with a look that holds threshold shut. He smiles broader. Deals are meals that talk back. The Death Guard's second wave lands like a dream about drowning. They have more plague engines, and the Basilica's undercroft rooms go humid with moss in a minute. Nurglings giggle down the stairs. A blight hauler barges through a side hall, and its cannon headbutts a saint's reliquary into sparks. Sisters change him. The new one is stern. The old man takes it as a cue. He walks into the blight hauler's smoke like an old man into a cold lake, because it pleases his sense of humor. The demon engine sees him without seeing. Reflexes honed on immaterial things. Its mouth sprays bile rounds that hit him and keep going. When they stop, his shape looks like it forgot a word. He leans into the engine's plates until they dissolve into long strings of shiny material. He opens the engine the way you open a beef fruit, twisting until guts slop. A small thing inside of larger wrongness shrieks. He takes that thing into the pocket and holds it there, not to eat, but to see if it grows different under his rules. The fight grinds. Gathalamore's bells fail. Holt's Vox network collapses inward to a ring of barked names. Thane meets a plague champion in the aisle and introduces her rosette to his teeth with the simple economy of someone who has done this before. Sisters carry their dead to the side, stack them near a saint's banner, and step over the stack when stepping over it is the right tactical choice. The sacristan finally gets the boys into the sealed chapel and does not see the boy with the cough touch the lock and leave a smear. He needs to feed. He will not take the easy meal by the choir door, not yet, because the woman with the censer swings her head like a bell when she laughs without laughing, and he has grown curious. He drops into the under-nave again, into a collapsed crawl space where the cult has tucked a vat of something they call soil, and he calls promises. 3 penitents tend the vat with spoons. They look up and their eyes are bruised fruit. He loves fear more than blood, so he covers his grin and speaks softly. "Show me what you grow," he says, and the one with the smallest spoon starts to cry, as if the words were a wedge. She says their garden is coming. He places her in the pocket with her spoon, because he is sentimental, and leaves the other 2 to run. He eats the soil. He learns the garden's map. He returns with the map in him. He knows where the Death Guard intend to plant their seed priests, and how the Basilica's groundwater will feed their prayer. He knows because maps are not drawings, but appetites made legible. He rises through a cistern and into the nave, where Thane holds a new line, this one crooked and necessary. "Below," he says, offering the taste of a plan because he wants to see how they chew. "They will breed your church." Thane reads him as if reading a bomb manual. Holt reads him as if reading a ledger. "We seal the cisterns," Holt says. "Melter charges. Collapse and flood. That will break the lattice entirely," Thane says. "We will be bathing in the Imperium's hands, and it will dry us as it pleases." She studies the old man as if he is a device she is tasked to aim, fire, and then bury. "Can you hold a channel open, one channel, while we bleed them in?" He tastes the request. He can lace his pocket as a sluice, maybe, a culvert that moves plague in and throws bone back out. It will sting. The pocket will peel. He will need to eat while doing it because the pressure will make him thin. "Feed me," he says again, to be sure he and the word still know each other. "And I open your drain." Thane's eyes move to the sealed choir. He shakes his head, pleased to be seen. "I will choose," he says, because it matters to him to confirm the shape of his meals. "Bring me the unclean." Holt points at 3 pallets of thrashing cultists, trussed with incense twine and cuffed with borrowed manacles. "Start with them," he says. "There are plenty more." He says it in the same register he uses when ordering reserve companies forward, or names burned into his retina. It is not cruelty, it is logistics. Cruelty is what you call logistics that remembers your face. The old man approaches the pallets and the cultists whimper like wood under heat. He kneels and touches each one on a different finger and opens 4 small doors at once. The pocket takes them with a sucking noise like wet boots. A seam opens behind him, low and long, a shallow ditch connecting cistern to nave. He drags the ditch with him like a broken chain, pulling its mouth along the floor. Green runoff slaps at it but slides in obediently. Codex note: manifestation of a localized non-Euclidean culvert connecting polluted groundwater to an extra-dimensional receptacle is consistent with documented warp-adjacent sluicing events in siege hagiographies. They move. Sisters fall back by plan, like kneeling, letting plague water rush toward him. He holds the sluice open and feels his room rattle. He can smell the boys' voices behind the sealed door, high and earnest, as if they are painting his walls with songs. The smell is irritating. He drags the sluice into the transept and angles it to bite into the first cistern's stone navel. Thane signals halt, and Holt's melter teams punch. The world walks sideways on its knees. The cistern belches its diseased gospel. The sluice drinks and screams. The old man stands knee-deep in his own problem, grinning like a cracked saint. He cannot catch all of it. Some squeals through. It touches Sister Roswyn's knee. She does not cry out, not because she is brave, but because she is very tired of making sound. The basilica groans. A statue of a martyr shears from its bracket and smashes into an aisle. Lustfire draws a bright net through the air and catches 3 plague flies who are not angels. The old man feels a thinness open in his pocket, like a stretch mark at the corner of a mouth. He reaches reflexively to feed. He stops, because the only easy meal is behind the sealed door. He looks at Thane, who is looking at him, and decides he will knock later. Holt's line tightens. The Death Guard's push loses momentum, because even corruption drowns. The old man closes the sluice with the confined disgust of a meat hook sliding out of use. He breathes rust. Again, Holt says, normally to mortals, but not today. Thane lifts a hand like a judge ending a trial. Not again, she says. He bleeds. He is pleased by her accuracy. The edges of his shape are shedding. Threads of him flutter in air currents shaped by thrown rockets and shouted prayers. The pocket's new pressure waves slap at him with affection and demand. His hunger scratches for something small and singing. He denies it. The denial costs him a sliver of time he had saved for savoring. Sisters countercharge. Their hymn breaks into plain speech. For those who cannot stand, they shout, which is not poetry but is useful. The old man enjoys utility when it makes bones move. He follows their angle and appears at the base of a plague marine carrying a totem pole of screaming heads bound with ivy. He pushes the totem into the marine's chest and leaves it there. The heads stop screaming because they are busy trying to remember how to be trees. The sacristan returns to the nave. The sealed door behind her locks itself again without help, because sometimes even doors try to be kind. She has blood on her forearms that is not hers. She lifts her sensor and smells something she will never smell again without thinking of now. The warmth of rust, the wet sweet of fruit going, the iron of a church teaching itself to fight. She sees the old man stand in a trough of wrong water, his grin wider than a confession, and begins to pray for him, because she does not know what else to do with such a shape. Thane tilts her head, as if listening to distant lore. Fleet reports additional signatures, she says, her voice pitched to run straight into Holt's ear. Holt waits for the phrase that will decide how hard he swallows. Pestilent choir, yes, she says, but more. Something else rides their wake. It feels like a hand with no skin. Holt frowns. Explanation. Null, Thane says. A blank. If the choir hired a Colexus, then dogma is a lie. Or it is not a Colexus, but it is a void, and voids hurt. He looks at the old man, but the old man is already looking at him, because the word void scratched him in a place that matters. He remembers halogen, and that humming box, and a doctor whispering to another doctor through glass. Maybe he hates the light because it is honest. The old man turns his head, and the world around his mouth exfoliates into dust. Plan, Holt says. Hold here, Thane says. Send your fastest to the cistern mouths and set charges we can blow as the void approaches. If it is a blank, its aura will starve sorcery. That includes Nurgle's gifts. It may starve our new friend. Holt looks at the sisters preparing to die in familiar ways, and at the pilgrims who have been told how to die since the day they first touched a rosary. We will need a corridor, he says. For civilians. Not civilians, Thane says. Witnesses. She glances at the sacristan. Put them where their eyes will matter. He knows they are making a work of himself now. Ideas nailed to his bark with liturgy. The old man is old enough to understand art when he is in it. He's old enough to understand tools when they sharpen themselves. He wants the blank they smell. He desires to meet a kind of silence that is stronger than his. Desire is rare in him and therefore bright. They arrange the nave as you arrange a sentence to be true. The sisters anchor a wedge. The Arbites use their bodies as punctuation at the choke points. Holt stands in a place where his survival will be inspiring if he survives, and expensive if he does not. Thane moves like a wolf between flanks, carrying law not as a book but as teeth. They hold, and the holding writes time into the church with very neat handwriting. It is a kind of magic people believed they had forgotten. The old man drinks it and feels full in a way that has nothing to do with meat. It makes his pocket manage its corners better. Through the basilica's burst doors, the street outside has become a series of green lakes broken by islands of memory. A rusted statue of St. Cantius stands knee-deep and knows it again. Geller runes down Main Avenue's burn a hurting blue. On the horizon, a black dot moves how absence moves. It does not bounce or hurry. It just undoes distance with contempt. The pestilent choir sings. A man laughs until his lungs rip and calls it gratitude. The black dot comes closer and becomes a figure in matte. A hooded silhouette without sound, surrounded by dying flies, who cannot understand why death forgets them. The sisters' hymn falters on a note that always held. The old man's grin tightens into discipline. Positions, Holt says. Witnesses, Thane says. And the sacristan finds her place and refuses to blink. Beneath them all, under the basilica's struggling lattice and the welded prayers of tech priests who would rather die than admit an error, the old man's pocket breathes like a long incision that refuses to close. He runs his tongue along its edge to feel the pain. He gives it a name to make owning it easier. He calls it Pilgrim. He remembers the halogen knives. He remembers the humming box. He remembers choosing the wrong note because it tasted like a different book. He steps forward to meet the absence with a hunter's economy, a cathedral of bone and stubborn will behind him, and a meal he is not yet allowed to take singing behind a sealed door. Outside, the Death Guard's third wave lands like the answer to a question no one here meant to ask. He smiles, because this is the part he understands. The absence approaches like a sermon you cannot hear but rush to obey. Plague smoke lifts in veils and shows where the street buckles. Sisters brace their boots in pewwood splinters. Arbites fix riot shields into a palisade of black teeth. The old man steps, not back, but aside, into a thinner layer of himself, so the coming hunger will miss the core and bite the rind. The black figure enters the basilica's mouth, as if water is trying to remember a riverbed. No sound, no flies. The air goes brittle. The old man feels Pilgrim recoil, its walls creaking as if a ship grazes stone. He smiles to show he can and watches candles gutter out in order of faith rather than distance. The Null lifts a hand and the hymn around the sisters loses a line, then another, as if a redactor walks down the staff crossing out notes with a quiet pen. A plague marine wades forward to crush the intruder and forgets how to hold his god in his head. The demon engine he drives turns on him in confusion and lovingly bites his shoulder. The Null says nothing. Saying is for people who have places inside words can go. Not ours, Thane says, low to Holt. Not wearing the officio's threads. A hireling, a captured asset, or Emperor Gardas, a convert. Convert to what? Holt asks, because he believes in nouns with uniforms. To nothing, Thane says, and Holt decides not to pursue that thought with his men listening. The old man angles away. The Null's aura shaves Pilgrim like a razor skimming grease. He tastes his own limits in his mouth and they taste like chalk. He moves laterally through a reliquary wall and emerges in a side nave where plague growth has made a garden of wrong fruit. He pinches one bulb and opens a mouth for it into Pilgrim. He wants to see if the Null's shaving reached this far. It did. The fruit refuses to rot under his rules and remains simply dead, which is less interesting. Outside, the Null's presence shreds the Death Guard bush without choosing sides. Nurglings fall asleep forever in little piles. Warp blooms wilt on the vine. The plague caster leading the wave, masked in copper, a cowled censer for a head, staggers as his personal choir goes silent inside his skull. He hurls a curse at the Null and the curse collapses into a cough. The Null does not cough. He does not do anything except be there and make the world simpler. Opportunity is the kind of holiness. Holt feels it and wastes nothing. Forward, he roars, and his voice remembers what it was like when he learned to command in storms. Sisters surge, bolters speak in short, clear sentences. Arbites turn their shields into blades by taking one more step than doctrine recommends. The old man slips along a pillar and trims the ankles of two Marines by deciding their skin is older there than the rest of them. He does not press the Null. He has learned patience in rooms with halogen knives. He lets the absence carve a canal through the fight and fills the canal's banks with his own little traps. A Marine puts his weight on a floor tile the Basilica has prayed over for 400 years, and the tile abruptly decides to be 20 minutes older than the Marine's foot, and the geometry fails him. He falls in a way armor cannot arrest. A sister puts a bolt round into the seam at his gorget, while he is learning gravity again. 3 beats like that, and the wave breaks. The bladecaster retreats beneath a chime of burst bells, dragging an altar cloth over his head like rain refuses to touch him. The Null turns his head toward the old man, as if he smelled a bruise, and takes one step that flays a meter of Pilgrim's edge. The old man slides behind Thane, not for shelter, but to make a point. "If you brought this," he tells her in the voice that unthreads names, "I will not eat your choir last." "I did not," she says, eyes never leaving the Null. "But I will use it." He likes her again, because she pairs reality the way he does, to the muscle. The Null pauses at the nave's center. The sacristan stands in her place with the censer. It feels absurd to her, like a child's prop in an adult war, and therefore important. The Null's hood angles toward her. She feels the nearest ideas slide off their hooks. She clings to one small phrase, "Keep your wrists firm," and it holds. The Null moves on. The old man notices that and files it where he files the taste of prayers that wear boots. They win the hour. It cost them the Basilica's west transept and the names of 8 dead that will not come back when called. It gets them air that does not moan and a line that is not immediately on fire. It gets them time, which is a currency the old man knows how to spend. Holt calls council because good commanders waste as little praise as ammunition. They gather in a sacristy reeking of spilt oil and sanctified sweat, its walls lined with cases of relics that have been prayed thin. Canoness Aledis arrives with battle grit across her lips like paint. She does not sit. Magos Solo pivots in on his treads, mechadendrites tasting the air for fault. The sacristan lingers by the door carrying a tray of water jugs because no one thought to tell her to leave. Thane notices and lets her stay, making a witness without breaking stride. "We hold the Basilica," Holt says. "We hold until the Palatine Guard relieves, or until I have to call this a last stand and dress it in nicer words. I would prefer relief." He nods to Thane. "Assessment. Deathguard Warband. Pestilent Choir," Thane says. "They are not here to sack a shrine and move on. They brought gardeners. They plant. Their engines excrete seeds that take root in sacred groundwater. They will make this city their farm unless we salt the soil." She gestures toward the old man without looking at him. "Our anomalies shut a cistern and turn their filth. Cost was non-zero." Magos Solo clicks a litany of agreement and warning. The lattice is sung by machine spirits grown careless with age. Retuning risks collapse. Collapse risks intrusion. Intrusion risks. He pauses because it displeases him to name things that are not machines. Wild coming. "We witnessed a null," Canoness Aledis says. "No rosette, no seal. It stranded a demon engine like a fish on stairs. It hurt the heretics and it will hurt our ally." She projects the last word like she is offering Thane a road back from blasphemy. Thane does not take the road. The null gave us space. While we have it, we plan. The old man leans on a reliquary case and watches glass flake into frosty crescents under his shoulder blade. "Plan to feed me," he says, gentle as a staircase that knows where your foot will go. Holt folds the map of the district open. He knows his map like he knows where his scars go under his shirt. He points to 3 cistern mouths the old man's soil map whispered about. "Sappers here, here, and here," he says. "Melter and Demo. Sister's Anchor. Arbite's Herd. PDF Do Not Break." He looks at the sacristan. Clerics and volunteers move pilgrims by numbered alleys. No bunching. If they cannot move, they will move no matter what we do. The sacristan nods. She knows those alleys as recipes, by smell. "There is a passage under St. Menhir's steps that cuts a corner," she says, and is startled to hear her own voice. Holt marks it without asking her how she knows. He trusts voices that come from people carrying water. Magos Solo turns 3 icons red and 1 icon amber on his data slate. "Your demo charges will ablate the lattice unless someone holds a vent." His mechadendrite tilts toward the old man like a sniffing dog. "The anomaly can make a culvert. It can take in what we cannot process. And it wants payment," Thane says. She sets her rosette on the table, like a coin no one can change. "Cultists," Holt says. "We have pallets of them as if we were merchants. Let them buy this city a breath." "Some beg," the sacristan says, before she knows she will say it. "Everyone begs," the old man says, almost tender. "The sound is what makes the taste true." Canoness Aledis does not glare at the old man, because she does not glare at weather. She looks at Thane. "You sanction this. It is an accusation and a request wrapped in plate." "I sanction survival," Thane says. "And I remember the difference between eating the unclean and eating because it is easy." She does not look at the choir door. She has already made her law there and prefers to keep making it. Holt points to the old man. You will hold our drains again. I will, he says, if you make forgiveness expensive. You will not touch our pura, a lady says, and it is not a question. I will not touch your pure if they remain pure, he says, which is truth as he defines it. Margot Solo hums a warning chord. The null will return. Its field will simplify your pilgrim. It will peel away your edges. It will refuse your doors. Good, the old man says, because some hungers are made more interesting by knives. They go to work. War is labor when done correctly. Sapper teams move like careful insects under the basilica, laying shaped charges with relic metal because it pleases them to think the saints watch. Sisters rotate to the front with the precision of stanzas in a hymn. Arbites marshal citizens with the sugared cruelty that keeps crowds alive. Holt's voxnets braid command into something that feels like a promise and does not break when pulled. The old man threads himself into pilgrim with care a butcher saves for his best blade. He snicks open 2 culverts, one shallow, one deep, and braces them against the lattice with a touch that makes years appear on iron. He tells Pilgrim to swallow variant liquids and spit bones. Pilgrim is in the mood to obey. He feeds it a string of cultists on the way, the sound of their pleas scudding across the surface like thrown stones. It begins again. The pestilent choir tries a different tune. They pour contagion down narrow stairs in disciplined pulses, measure their flies, pair their plague bells with rocket barrages. They learn. The sisters learn faster, because learning under fire is why they exist. Canoness Aledis takes a wound in the shoulder and ties it closed with a strip of her tabard. She keeps moving, because she would die of shame if she did not. The old man holds the culverts as Holt's melter teams punch the cistern mouths. Rot water plunges into Pilgrim and screams when it discovers Pilgrim remembers how to be dry. His edges skin back from the null-shaped ache. He feels the silence like frost along old wires. He steadies himself by choosing what to find beautiful. The way a sister plants her feet when she fires. The way a Mechanicus Junior mutters to a machine spirit to embolden it for death. The way the sacristan refuses to blink when bodies pass like parade banners. They win the second hour. They pay by carrying their dead, while their arms itch with plague that does not know yet if it wants them. They gain by killing the garden before it can take root in stone. Holt does not praise because praise spends itself. He simply pauses his breath long enough that the pause says the thing. Inquisitor Thane calls a kill quiet. Her acolytes raise their hands to form a circle in air, and the circle makes private sound. She gestures the old man inside it, not to trap him but to allow words to keep their shapes. You saved us, she says. I ate for you, he answers. I will remember, she says, which is not always a gift. She lowers her hand and addresses the room. We keep the pressure on. We take the choir's cedar priest, cut the head, shake the rot. All the while, we watch for the null. We should parley with the null, Holt offers, showing that he can say insane things if they might end with his men alive. You do not parley with absence, Aledis says. You mark it and aim around it. Sometimes absence eats at you, and the thing that would have is suddenly hungrier, Thane says. So we use it, but we plan for it to be a blade in every hand. They do not get to plan longer. Alarm is a discipline in this city, and knows when to enter. A junior Vox officer staggers through the sacristy door and preserves his salute through sheer piety. New contact, he says. Not choir. Fast. Hot. Descent vector straight to Basilica. No warp signature. No anything. Holt's mouth tightens. And? The Vox officer swallows. Officio Assassinorum code burst, sir. Ciphers. Ordo approved. His eyes cut to Thane's rosette and away, like looking into a furnace. Officio, Aledis says softly. and the word makes the relics on the walls behave. Thane takes the data slate, gims the burst, and shows a tooth finally. Operative designation Calf Null, Clade Colexus, she says. Attached to a silent sister detachment, the Vigil of Quietus. Tasking: intercept and neutralize proscribed anomalies. Assist in plague denial until Ordo Sepulturum arrives. They were hunting the choir. They found us too. The old man feels Pilgrim pull tight like a drumskin in a cold wind. He grins because smiling at bullets was a habit long before he learned to walk through walls. He tastes the name Calf Null, and it tastes like being told at last the exact shape of a wound. Power scaling. Interlude. 1. Pariahs do not project force so much as remove the field where forces can meet. Their presence flattens the gradients anomalies exploit. A pocket like Pilgrim relies on pressure differences, fear against time, memory against matter. A null steals difference. It is a theft of contrast. To him it will feel like being forced to be honest inside his own lies. Thane reads their faces and writes orders. Canoness form an honor line as if greeting a saint. Shields up, him held. Halt. Sappers to secondary cisterns. If the null kills our drains, we switch to fire. Magos Solo. Prepare to deaden lattice sections in sequence. Better clean holes than warped cloth. Anomaly. She faces the old man directly. If you can help, you will. If you cannot, you will not eat us for failing you. He bows in the manner of a man who learned etiquette in a sacrificial pit. I am curious, he says. Curiosity is my oldest vice. I will help to see what happens. The silent sisters arrive like the sound of a page turning in a silent room. 4 figures in burnished plate step through the basilica's mouth with a stride that erases indecision in those who see it. Their leader's helm is a blank face with grief carved around the edges. They do not salute. They do not speak. The air around them smooths. Between them glides Calf Null, a scarecrow in matte, skull helm slick with anti-light, neck cage whispering quiet. His mere approach makes Magos Solo's incense tape a gutter. Thane steps forward, rosette in palm, acknowledging equals whose jurisdiction climbs where hers cannot. Mission, she says. Calf Null tilts the skull 1 degree. Purge anomalies, he says, voice a blade drawn across wool. The words feeling like someone else's. This garden, that thing. The skull angles toward the old man with a hunger that contains zero joy. Aladis's gauntlet tightens on her bolt pistol. She does not lift it because she does not point guns at tools she intends to use first. Priority, she says. Plague, Calf Null says. Then it. Even assignment is subtraction when he speaks. The silent sisters take their posts like punctuation at the end of a hard sentence. Their null auras spread like dry wind. The nave's candles die in sequence as if drilled. Pilgrim bunches in the old man's teeth, and he refuses to let the flint show. He pretends it is a new kind of knife to taste. They go again. The choir has learned the basilica's timing and pushes to break rhythm. The Vigil of Quietus walks into their disease with their faces turned toward a center inside themselves no one else can see. Nurgle's blessings dry to dust at their ankles. The old man steps sideways into Pilgrim and discovers the floor, where he meant to be, has become information and opinion, rather than stone. He chooses to stand anyway. He breathes, and Pilgrim answers the way a bell does, when you lay your palm flat against it. On the steps, Calf Null meets a plague caster and ruins the sorcerer by simply being what he is. No duel, no charge. The spell that begins on the plague caster's lips dissolves into a wet sob. The null lifts one hand and touches the copper mask. It turns into old green glass and flakes away. The plague caster sees his own face too late. The vigil take him apart with short work like women shelling nuts. The old man watches closely. He learns how far the Nulls' pressure reaches, the way it casts a cone like light inverted. He notes how the blanks around Cafnol overlap their zones, making a moving desert in which his pocket cannot drink. He steps into a column to test an old trick and finds the stone refuses to be a door while the Null is near. The refusal is polite and final. He shifts, uses what remains. He does not slip through walls. He walks stairs that used to be angles. He does not open culverts. He makes buckets and empties them with his hands. He is not joyless about it. Old crafts come back easier than sins. He grabs a Marine's elbow and remembers the time he taught a child to dislocate her thumb to get free of cuffs. He applies that memory to armor and laughs when the plate gives. They barely hold, but barely is a win under the right sky. Holt's men keep their boots where boots matter. Aladis bleeds and refuses to inventory it. Thane uthers the lines by habit and turns the fights she can see into sentences she can finish. Margot Solo declaims to the lattice as he dials it down, speaking to a machine spirit like a father who knows he must let a son fail to learn. The tide drops. The choir recoils. A thing the size of a barge moans itself away into alleys no longer shaped for it. Cafnol stands in the nave under the groined vaults and ends the lives of 6 cruel things seeking his ankles without ever looking down. Then, still facing outward, he addresses the old man. "You are a wound pretending to be a scar," Cafnol says. "You will end." The old man's grin lifts to show that he too can carve grief around the edges of a face. "I've ended many times," he says. "It is an acquired taste." "Not acquired," Cafnol says. "Inflicted." The vigil's leader, her badge etched with a long-ago war's ash, turns her helm toward Thane. She gestures a sign for containment. The Sisters of Silence do not make threats. They create futures with their bodies alone. "Containment after," Thane says. "We have a farm to burn." The Silent Sister does not nod. She simply does not leave. Agreement is sometimes as simple as that. They hold a shorter council in the nave itself, because the basilica's air wants plans in it like lungs want breath. Holt scrawls with chalk on a saint's splint, and the saint tolerates it, which is a miracle no one has time to mark. The old man listens and eats a small fear a boy drops when a shell lands outside, so the boy can keep moving like a man. He believes in leaving people capable of coming back to him later. They agree to strike the cedar priest. He will be in the garden's heart beneath the nave, in a vault the choir has found or made. They will go down, not because down is safer, but because farms grow in soil and soil is honest. Cafnol will lead the point because his presence will spoil every spell waiting there. The old man will go because he wants to see how deep the Null cuts. They descend through a spiral cut for processions and reuse now for killing. The vigil moves like a word your grandmother would not say in church. Holt takes a squad because a commander belongs where his maps change. Aladis goes because she believes in examples made with sternness. Thane goes because law is not a balcony job. The sacristan is told to stay and does not argue, because obedience is harder than courage in some houses. The vault is a garden, and also a wound. Roots of pipe and bone kiss in the wet. The cedar priest kneels at its center, a trunk made of priests dressed in copper. Each face hammered flat and nailed to the next with ivy. He tends a tree of plague valves that pump with the rhythm of a church emptying after mass. Around him, 5 plague marines stand like statues of stability, and an unmuted demon thing crawls along a wall like a play that lasted too long. Cafnol enters, and the vault blanches. The pumps sigh, the valves cough. The demon forgets how to be charming and howls like a cupboard losing its last dish. The plague marines brace and fire, and their bolts are just heavy brass today. The old man watches Pilgrim try to open a door across the vault and fail as if hands shoved it closed from both sides. He laughs and uses gravity instead. He takes the demon's hand and teaches it a new way to count its fingers. He pulls 2 fingers off, and the diamond discovers it only had one all along. It goes away into a corner and stands like a thought someone will finish later. Adeptus hits the nearest Marine at the knee and then the neck in one breath. Holt's squad lays fire like a tablecloth. Thane moves as if she is fitting a law into a gap. Cuffnull reaches the cedar priest. The priest lifts a censer and the incense inside dies politely. The Null places his hand on the trunk, right at a seam between 2 hammered faces, and presses with a patient pressure that owes nothing to strength. The trunk cracks like a confession becoming truth. The cedar priest speaks, finally. "You will be compost," he tells Cuffnull, with the satisfaction of a man repeating a lesson someone he loved taught him. "I am Lack," Cuffnull says. "Compost needs me to be a lie." He presses. The trunk settles. The garden stops. They tear the vault out of its own future with charges Mago Solo planted in a prayer that pretended to be engineering. The old man takes one last taste, just a smear of the cedar priest's certainty, to see if certainty ages well. It does not. He leaves it on his tongue like a story he will not finish telling. On the way up, the basilica decides to remember being a place where people sing, because the pipes no longer wheeze plague. The sacristan hears it and weeps in a supply closet so her tears will not stain the nave. She wipes her face with the hem of her robe and returns to carrying water, because grief that becomes job is the strongest kind. They emerge into light that has dust in it instead of spores. Holt orders his men to drink and then orders them to stop drinking. Adeptus allows her shoulder to be bound. Thane nods to Cuffnull with a respect that does not include affection. The old man looks at the silent sisters lining the nave and understands that they intend to keep standing until he has a problem solved. He appreciates that. It clarifies the afternoon. Above, the fleet vox threads scream with a new note. Not plague, not null. Something in between, or perpendicular. Thane steps into a little cone of private sound and listens with her eyes. She looks at Holt and allows herself the luxury of one curse. "Mortivox," she says. "A plague caster with a library. He's taken the choir's choir into himself. He sings hexes that survive nulls because they are written in the gaps people leave when they stop believing." Holt does not ask her to explain faith on a battlefield. "Vector?" "Here," she says. They look at Cuffnull. He tilts the skull. "Void will thin it," he says. "Not sever. It will cut you." He does not specify to whom. The old man licks his teeth. He hears the first bars of Mortivox's approaching song, coming through pipes and bones alike. A music that is not sound. It tastes like mildew that learned your name. It will try to get into Pilgrim through doors he did not remember he had. He is suddenly very glad he did not eat the choir. "Positions," Holt says again, because it is the only sentence a captain gets to write twice in a life and live. "Witnesses," Thane says again, because victory without eyes becomes a rumor. The vigil of Quietus shifts stance. Their auras pull in, tight as fists, for the first time holding their null like a blade rather than a blanket. Cuffnull lifts one hand. The air around his fingers buckles. The old man feels Pilgrim grind its teeth and makes the choice to keep his grin even though it hurts. Mortivox arrives like damp language. The basilica's fresco saints weep a little mildew. Words in old books turn a green shade and curl at the tips. Holt's map blurs at the corners of the alleys. The sacristan's censer begins to tilt in her hand toward the floor, as if it wants to rest. The plague that is not plague steps through the door, wearing a man with a voice for classrooms. He smiles like a teacher grading a paper that surprises him, and the paper is the knave. "I thought this faith would be harder," he says. "Good, we want the soft ones." Null steps forward, and silence avalanches. Mortivox's lips keep moving, but his words hide behind his teeth. The Vigil take 3 paces together, and their null becomes a shape Mortivox has to walk around. The old man discovers Mortivox in Pilgrim, pressing through as if he found a 0 day in an old lock. The hex comes not as rot or demon, but as a note that tells the pocket it is only a cupboard. He grabs the note like a wasp and folds it until it believes itself paper and sticks it under a weight. He feels the sting as it resists. He laughs because some new hurts are so clean. Mortivox raises both hands and uncorks a bottle of despair he saved for a bright day. The sisterhood bow their heads as if at mass and refuse it. Holt's men make their mouths into hard lines and refuse it. Thane makes an oath hurt more than fear and refuses it. The old man dips his fingers into Mortivox's thought and finds a story about a boy who wanted to be a gardener because it would make his mother proud. He breaks that story in half and leaves both halves where Mortivox can find them. The fight is not loud. It is a wrestling over which truths are allowed to accumulate. The Vigil's silence erases scaffolding. Mortivox tries to hang his plague on. Holt discipline gives his men sentences to stand in when language fails elsewhere. The old man makes little doors where Mortivox did not think of doors, and through each one he pulls something Mortivox believes he cannot live without. Mortivox flinches once, and in that blink, Aladis moves and puts 3 bolts into his chest. A ranger's canon law would call indecorous if law had room for decency today. Mortivox staggers back, lips forming a last shape that could be love or math. Null reaches him in a stride and lays 2 fingers against his throat. The plague song stops. He dies like someone waking from a dream he had not finished publishing. The choir dies louder. Their engines stop mid-note. Their marines look down at their hands as if the metal should tell them what to do, and it does not. The garden in the nave's foundations sighs itself flat. The basilica smells like a church again, under the rot, like a kitchen after a feast where everything broke and everyone laughed anyway. They win the 3rd hour. It costs them 100 small courage acts no one will list. It buys them a city quarter that will be cleanable rather than martyred. It buys them an afternoon in which to decide what to do with a wound that smiles. Holt tells the sacristan to drink, and she obeys, and hates herself for how good it tastes. Thane sends a coded burst to orbit, calling in Ordo Sepulturum and requesting an armored quarantine ring with teeth. Aladis kneels under a statue that does not yet know whom it will belong to after this, and thanks the throne without asking for anything in return. Margot Solo prays all the way down his cables and promises to do 2 extra maintenance rotations a day for a year if the lattice forgives him for the things he told it to do. Null stands before the old man and does not move for 3 breaths. The Vigil arrange themselves to make a wall that is not a prison, but would make a passable tomb. "Your doors are thin," Null says. "You cannot keep any promise." "I never try," the old man says. "I prefer bargains with rust in them." "You cannot remain," Null says. After, Thane says, "we will speak. Until then, you will not start a war in my church." She does not raise her voice. The church raises itself to carry it. The old man leaves before he contradicts himself by growing bored. He steps into Pilgrim to feel where the Null shaved him and counts new edges as if counting coins. He loses count at 7, which irritates him in a way he finds reassuring. He opens a very small door and eats one of Mortivox's leftover certainties because he earned it and because it is delicious to ruin a dead man's favorite shape. He surfaces in a side chapel where the sacristan has taken the choir boys to see daylight without plague in it. Their singing is no longer locked behind the door. It spills into the room with a clumsy purity that feels like fresh mortar. He stands in the threshold and lets the sound touch him. It does not change him. It merely sits there, an undisputed fact. He has always loved undisputed facts. They make the lies sharper. He turns away because curiosity has somewhere else to go. He wants to see what the vigil look like when they sleep, if they sleep. He wants to taste the silence they wear from closer, not to eat it, but to learn if Pilgrim can hold a handful without tearing. He wants, which is the most dangerous thing he ever allows. Night comes as a dimming of colors rather than a fall because the sky is ash, not blue. They rotate watches. The vigils stand and do not shift weight. Hold dreams with his eyes open and has a ledger in his hand even unconscious. Aladis snatches 3 minutes sitting up and wakes with a prayer half said and finishes it as if nothing happened. Thane explores the basilica's underways with a lamp and a gun in her hands and thinks about laws that have to become new. The old man walks the walls and learns the name scratches left generations ago. He tastes the wood of an old pew and discovers a kiss carved there he could push his tongue through if he wanted to be unkind. He visits the undercroft where the garden died and listens for echoes and hears instead the sound of a woman somewhere in the city telling a child that tomorrow will have bread. He practices not making a door there. He succeeds for 2 breaths and then makes a door elsewhere to reward himself. He is patient until he does not want to be. He walks into the nave at dawn and finds Cafnal standing exactly where he left him. Exactly as if he had been waiting for the day to turn into something he could end. The vigil are unmoved. Thane is at the map again, drawing arrows that look like ways to breathe. Holt is arguing with a Palatine Guard Vox officer who insists the guard will arrive and refuses to say when. Today, Thane says without looking up. We take the choir's cruiser's ground control node. They landed their guts. The ship must still bleed command. We cut the throat. Canoness, I need your hammer. Holt, your men will carry sappers like relics. Vigil. She looks up, chooses her words, and decides to risk them. If you would lend us your shadow, we would appreciate the simplicity. The silent sister makes a sign for we stand. Cafnal makes no sign at all and is the sign. The old man grins because he sees a plan that will put him where the lattice hums loudest, where Pilgrim will either split or grow a new room in its corner. He loves thresholds. He is a threshold. He is hungry in the precise way that makes him useful. Someone rings a bell that survived, and it sounds like a throat cleared before a proclamation. The city answers by breathing in time with it. The sacristan tightens her wrists on the chain of the censer and knows exactly how to keep them firm. Children sing because adults tell them to, and because sometimes obedience saves lives. They step toward the choir's node. The basilica watches them go, with the satisfaction churches have when finally used for their design. The old man passes the sealed choir door and pauses. He puts his rusted palm against it and hears the boys inside loose at last, a little flat, a little splendid. He does not open it. He leaves it shut. It is the most difficult thing he has done today, and it tastes like growing up. They move because standing still lets rot think for you. They broke the cisterns, killed the cedar priest and mortivox, and learned the shape of a silence that can skin his pocket. Now they push for the choir's ground node. Before the garden learns a new song. Briefing happens in a cloister where candle soot has drawn faint halos. A hololith shows the choir's control web, the Cantori spire, a Vox bell tower fused to a pilgrim hostel and a pipe nexus. Its cords run under streets and through bone ledgers, braiding sacred copper with sewage. Choir engrams cling to physical resonators. Bells, pipe organs, reliquary flues. Nox spores sit in switch cavities like choices waiting for fingers. Standard counters, jamming, Auspex ghosts, machine-write purges fail because the signal is not only signal, it is humidity, memory, and acquires habit of breathing together. Magos Eren Solo sets icons with a mechadendrite that trembles despite extra bracing prayers. They wrote plague into sound and sound into brass, he says. We can cut cords. We cannot argue with breath. Canoness. Alidis points at approach alleys that always flood first when it rains. We go straight, she says. Him loud enough to keep fear orderly. Holt sharpens the plan into steps, simple enough to remember while dying. Sappers with melter. Sisters on the spear. Arbites on the funnel. PDF on the lift. Inquisitor, your vigil walk the middle and keep the world simple. Cafnol is already turned toward the spire, his skull helm like an eclipse in a white sky. The vigil of Quietus take places around him with the economy of people who delete rather than add. The old man listens, smiling, because the spire will hum like the lattice, and Pilgrim will have to learn a new kind of corner. He'll be close to brass and breathing. He can work with both. They step into streets that still remember how to be roads. Plagues have slumped into scabs. Statues lean as if listening. A storm has shaved corners off buildings. The spire stands ahead, grey and wet with bells like mouthfuls of coins and windows like closed eyes. The choir defend from rotting balconies with discipline that insults stereotypes. Plague Marines kneel and fire on the beat. A myphitic blight hauler crawls along a colonnade, breath smoking. Filth grenades burst with a tenderness that makes skin itch in shapes. Noxious Blightbringers toll little handbells that mean reload and advance. The vigil walks into it and the air goes dry. Curses evaporate mid-flight. A bolt of bilious light becomes a moth that forgets where lamps are. The old man splits along the seam of a wall and reappears at the edge of a balcony because he wants the Blightbringer's bell. He hates authority you can shake. He lays a rusted palm on the bell and whispers an older note into it. The bronze remembers a different master and goes dull. The Blightbringer swings and hears nothing. He looks confused inside his helmet, and Aladis shoots the place where confusion meets armor. Holt's men move as one phrase repeated until true. Arbites herd pilgrims down a stair scooped clean by boots. PDF lay last on a steady hum so loud their teeth buzz. Thane points once and a melter team changes a supporting column into a hot story. The spire groans and drops bricks in a pattern that makes a new alley where there was not one. They reach the base doors, which are not doors but lungs. They open and close on breath that smells like brass polish and old soup. The vigil stands in the exhale until the breath forgets to push. Cafnol steps through first because subtraction belongs at the front of equations. Inside, the spire is a machine that learned to love incense. Pipes snarled with ivy coil around confessionals. Dust lies thick where bells taught it to settle. A stair spirals up around a hollow core where air carries song like gossip. Up, Thane says. Kill the bells, cut the cords. They climb into noise that is not sound. The choir wrote their orders into the acoustic habits of stone. The old man hears the habits and answers with his own. He rubs his shoulder against a pillar and leaves age on it like sweat. The pillar buckles enough to mistune the stair. Plague Marines meet them on a landing that thinks it is a dais. The fight is short and ugly. The vigil walks through their shots. Sisters put bolts where doctrine says armor is allowed to be weak. Holt fires by feel and hits miraculously because he refuses to remember the men that he will not hit later. The old man sees a bell with a crack like a healed lip. He climbs it the way roaches climb, with stubborn angles. He presses his face to it and hums Pilgrim's low note into the bronze. The bell absorbs nothing. Cafnol's field has dried the oil that would let such a deal slide. He laughs and digs a fingernail under the crack instead. Metal peels like a scab. He feels Null before he sees him, the way you feel a window shut behind you. The Null's field wipes wet off surfaces and pulls Pilgrim's breath against its ribs. The old man's grin tightens. He has budgeted for pain. At the tower heart, on a landing ringed with bells and bone tubes, they find the choir's tallykeeper, a plague marine in segmented plate with a ledger of skin and a pen of spine. His cowl is stitched with coins taken from tongues. He speaks in a voice meant for counting. Additions, he says, watching them take shape. Subtractions, interest. Thane lifts her rosette and stacks law on top of it with her mouth. By the Ordo's writ and the Emperor's will, this control node is forfeit, she says. Lay down your calculus. The tallykeeper laughs until bile runs. Mathematics do not stop because you stop breathing, he says, and beckons with the ledger. Plague vents open. Pipe organ valves exhale a damp that wants to be a hymn. Bells begin to work their mouths. Null raises his hand, and the bells forget the lyrics. The problem is that sound is not the only medium. The ledger's columns scrawl themselves in fly patter, and the fly patter is in the air, and the air is in everyone's lungs. The tallykeeper writes due, and the spire twists to make room. Standard counters fail in exactly the way Mago Solo promised. The problem is worship. You cannot jam devotion. You can only redirect it or outstubborn it. Canoness Aladis chooses a hymn, whose words are mostly verbs. Holt sets his jaw like a vice. Thane starts cutting cords with a blade blessed to be uninteresting to gods. The old man feels a different danger. Pilgrim leans toward the spire's hollow core like a thirsty dog toward a well. He can open a culvert through the shaft that would drink the choir's breath. He can do it, but Null's field will shave the culvert as it forms and the rubbing might tear it. He has never torn Pilgrim. He would like to know how it sounds. He does it because curiosity and usefulness share a face in him. He nails the culvert to the spire's stone with 3 memories: a humming box, a girl with a sensor, a doctor spelling patients wrong. The culvert opens as a vertical sigh. The spire's breath falls into Pilgrim. Pilgrim drinks. The tallykeeper writes arrears and feels the column move against him for the first time. Null turns. Skull helm tilt a degree sharper. The null field claws along the culvert and finds purchase. Pilgrim screams into him across the contact, a silent scream with teeth. The old man holds it open with pride, and then with pain, and then with instinct. He watches the ledger pen, as if it were a spear coming. The tallykeeper signals. 2 Blightlord Terminators in cracked plate step out of pipe arches like statues dropping politics. One hefts a flail that radiates excuse. The other carries a sight that remembers every harvest it was not meant for. They do not aim for the sisters. They aim for Null. It is not treachery. It is economics. The choir understands subtraction. The flail whistles toward the null field and meets it the way rain meets salt. The null eats the weapon's story and leaves it iron. Null leans like a man feeling a change in wind. He makes a small adjustment with one foot. The flail kisses air where a head was. The scythe carves for the old man. It is a Nurgle blade, less about cutting and more about convincing. He moves to step through a bell to let it miss, and finds the bell is a wall while Null watches. The scythe finds his left flank. It slides through him like a promise through a child. It shears Pilgrim in that spot into clean halves. He feels it as a bright absence, a sterile line across his shape where rust can't adhere. He stumbles into himself and discovers the place won't hold. The blade did not gnaw. It erased decay. It left him too clean there to grip. A wound made of honesty. He hates it immediately and respects it because it is new. He yanks the Blight Lord off his feet by turning the floor under him into a page that cannot carry that much text. The Blight Lord slams into a bell and sounds like a jar of coins. Aladis steps in and turns his throat valve off with a bolt like punctuation. The flail. Blight Lord overcommits toward Cuff Null again. Holt plants a melter charge on his hip in a moment of professional spite. The explosion rings the tower wrong. The tally keeper advances. He dips the ledger pen in a jar that held tongues of things that talk slower than men. He writes a ledger line through air aimed at the old man's spine. The line draws numbers where he has been, and each number is a door he left open. He feels them as lines tugging like hooks. Cafnal is there before the line lands. He lays his palm flat against the air just beside the old man, and the ledger line meets Null and becomes ink that dries too quickly to write. The tally keeper blinks inside rotten optics. The vigil's leader slides through that blink and removes the hand that holds the pen at the wrist. It does not fly. It simply falls like a poor idea. The old man's culvert trembles. He holds it by hating the pain correctly. The wound left by the scythe keeps leaking clean. He cannot stick it shut because Pilgrim will not take rust there. He tries another trick. He remembers the way the sacristan held her wrists firm, and he translates that muscle into geometry. The culvert steadies. He laughs at himself because he just used someone else's discipline and he liked it. The tally keeper retreats. Armor problem that does not stay solved, and bellows a command that makes the spire exhale all its doors. Doors open. Doors that were windows open. Doors that were walls open. Things fall out. Men, icons, bell clappers, breath. The vigil brace, sisters anchor, Holt anchors. The old man lets the culvert drink vertical as Pilgrim groans. Cafnol reaches to close the culvert because it is a hazard. The old man reaches to keep it open because it is a tool. Their hands meet against air, and reality chooses to be less polite. The duel happens without fanfare because nothing in it wants witnesses to understand either side. Cafnol's palm lays a coin of void against the old man's knuckles. The coin spreads along bones like frost. The old man's other hand becomes a door that refuses the hand that refuses it. The two geometries interpenetrate. Pilgrim pushes against a surface that will not admit pressure exists. The old man tries to pull Cafnol half a thumb's worth into Pilgrim, just to learn the taste of a null inside him. Cafnol drives a null spike into Pilgrim. A field geometry trick, not metal, that plants one point of Pilgrim on the spire, like a nail through flesh. The bucket screams a thin, old scream like train rails cooling at night. The old man staggers because part of him is now held down, where he does not control the story. Pain is a study, and he has had centuries to enroll. This hurts in a new dialect. He sees a line of clean cutting through his left side, a slick where rust refuses to cling, a sterile gap that reads like honesty and feels like winter. He tries to smear age across it to get grip. The smear slides off. For the first time since he learned to walk through walls, a part of him refuses to be his. He reacts the way predators react to surprise. He bites. He bites with Pilgrim, opening a small door at Cafnol's wrist to taste the edge of void. The taste is not salt or iron or sweet. It is the taste of a room with no furniture. He snaps closed before he loses more teeth. The spike holds. The culvert shivers and collapses. The spire's breath returns to itself with a sound like a choir re-entering after a soloist. The tally keeper laughs through a mask that smells like pennies. Thane moves and her pistol speaks a sentence with a period for his forehead. It does not kill him. Nurgle's math is stubborn. but the ledger falls beside him and her sister's boot persuades it that falling is permanent. Silence spreads in pauses between clatter. The old man and Null break apart like two magnets that were never meant to face this way. The vigil's leader steps between with her presence alone, not to separate but to add structure. Aledis lifts her hand by instinct and lowers it by discipline. Holt watches because he believes in leverage, and sometimes leverage is letting two immovable objects learn respect. Codex note: direct null anomaly contact pins extra-dimensional cavities to local frames, creating sterile fissures where warp-adjacent corrosion cannot adhere. Unhealed, such wounds behave as permanent anti-edges. The Tallykeeper's retreat becomes rout when Magos Solo hurls a litany into the spire's hangars, and the hangars obey by letting bells fall at the wrong time. Brass crashes, ropes snap. The vigil cuts throats while ducking debris with the grace of women who do this in dreams. Holt's sappers turn control plinths into puddles. Thane stamps a sigil onto the main valve set, and the sigil burns cold. The choir's node loses its breath. The old man breathes rust and discovers rust does not help. The clean line along his side glows with the honesty of a scraped knee. Pilgrim sulks like a wounded animal denied a chance to run under the table. He watches Null's skull tilt, as if measuring whether to finish the job now or postpone until the last inch matters most. Something arrives that is not in anyone's plan. The spire holds a reliquary niche for Saint Cantius's fingerbone. It has been prayed over for longer than laws were neat. When the bells fell, the niche cracked. Light seeps out, not golden, but the color of intentionality. It spreads across the landing like a thin layer of oil that is instead dryness. Where it touches plague, plague peels. Where it touches sisters, sisters stand straighter. Where it touches the old man, it brands. He does not scream because screaming is a vocabulary he spends inward. He feels the brand adhere to the clean wound and go brighter. It is not fire. Fire negotiates. This is verdict. He staggers toward the edge of the light and finds the edge follows him like a shepherd. The vigil's leader does not step to block or to aid. Thane does not lift her rosette. Holt does not issue an order. They let the spire decide. The brand prints a small sigil in the clean line, a cross-thorn shape that looks like a person kneeling and a door ajar. It hurts less after. It hurts on a schedule like bells. The old man touches it and his finger comes away honest. The reliquary shuts itself the moment it is done. The light snuffs as if it had been blowing its cheeks out and got bored. The spire's dust drifts down as if it never learned anything new. The brand remains. Stakes get written into skin so everyone can read, even the one who doesn't want to. They descend with the spire's node dead behind them. They killed a piece of the choir's reach and paid for it with a wound that refuses to listen, plus the knowledge that a saint smiled at their mess long enough to press a shape into the anomaly. Outside the Basilica Quarter, the day has turned the color of pewter washed in milk. Pilgrims gather around water pumps and learn they still work if you count while you pull. The sacristan leads a bucket line past soldiers and nulls and monsters with a smile printed into him by a saint, and her wrists do not shake. She sees the old man stagger and wants to help with the honesty of someone who has not learned to lie to terror yet. He tilts his grin at her and sees her accent of pity as a challenge. He turns away and misses her frown, which is not fear, which would have delighted him, but disappointment, which is something else and tastes different. The council after is quieter, because everyone has learned something that cannot be unlearned. Thane's voice is sanded down to intention. Holt is counting on his fingers, not to keep numbers straight, but to remain attached to the countable. Aledis has blood under her nails and does not clean it yet, because dirt keeps you honest until you need glory. Margot Solo blows incense absent-mindedly on his own shoulder wound, and it works because how could it not? At this point, we cut their throat, Holt says. They will either bleed out or reach for a knife. They will reach for a sermon, Thane says. Plague is always a liturgy. She looks at the brand on the old man's side. She does not let her stare turn into a devotional act, because that would be a sin with too many definitions today, and we just performed one of our own. Calf Null stands where walls do not touch him and makes absence. Anomaly is compromised, he says. It will become more unstable under pressure. We should end it while we hold. You should try, the old man says, polite because he can be. I would like to see how many doors remain when the room itself is nailed down. You cannot keep your room, Calf Null says. You cannot keep any room, because a room is a promise, the old man says, and enjoys the truth of that like biting into glass and liking how it sounds. Thane lifts her hand, and all their mouths remember who in this room gets to be the period. Enough, she says. Our options are now doctrinal, not tactical. The anomaly saved this city 3 times. It cost us once. I will not have us become calculator priests of blood who forget which column matters. Aladis nods, because she can live with dirty arithmetic if someone more qualified keeps the ledger straight. What do you propose, Inquisitor? She asks, voice clipped clean. Sanction or sever, Thane says. There is no middle, and we cannot write sanction in a basilica under siege. We do not have the seals or the witnesses. We cannot write sever either without pretending that we didn't ask the anomaly to hold drains and drink our filth. So we take it to the place where law lives dangerous, Holt says, catching the sentence because he likes when conclusions rhyme with survival. Terror, Thane confirms. The throne, the High Lord's shadow at least, if not the light. Custodians, the Astronomican's edge. The Conclave Minor will do if the Major won't receive. We need blanks. We need seal song. That isn't a parish trick. We need to ask a god to sign the thing we built today. Margot Solo makes a different kind of sign. Travel is not trivial, he says. Your lattice is cracked. The choir has kin. The void is rude this season. And we will be transporting an anomaly that eats rules in a container made of rules. The vigil can make a box out of nothing and stand around it until nothing envies it, Aladis says dryly. I have seen it. Calf Null does not tilt, but something in the air around him leans. We will escort, he says. The words clearly not his first preference, but exactly his mandate. We will keep it simple until the throne makes it simpler. The old man laughs and the laugh falls apart into rust on his tongue. The brand throbs, a slow metronome. Pilgrim rolls in his mouth like a pebble. He has never liked having destinations. They make hunger feel like a debt rather than a hobby. But there is curiosity here that lives longer than fear. What will the biggest door look like if it is mostly locked? They give themselves 2 hours to turn a siege into a convoy. In those hours, the choir makes one last decision about Gathalamor. They will not keep the city. They will salt it in the way they prefer, with graves that do not get to be graves. They send bomb choirs, little devices with lungs, into sewers. They rig bells to detonate whenever someone thinks of forgiveness too hard. They wire prayers to explode if mispronounced. Holt's men discover enough to make the evacuation a new war. Arbites move families the way shepherds move flocks ahead of storms. Sisters pass out bread and bullets with the same gestures. The vigil measures corridors of silence between door frames and makes them wide enough for people to walk 2 abreast. Margot Solo writes a script for the lattice that will allow it to fail in organized sections when it fails, as if death can be alphabetized. The old man drags Pilgrim along the worst corners and eats because eating helps him hold the clean wound's edges together. Thane brings him pallets of cultists and plague things, and criminals whose death warrants were written 3 hours ago for crimes that used to be minor. He takes them without flourish. He refuses 2 by mistake to be, and 1 on purpose. An Arbite's corporal with plague dust on his boot sole, but a mind steady enough to survive it. The refusal costs him. The clean line stings brighter. He will pay for discipline with pain. He decides he likes that exchange rate today. Temptation comes in the form of a smell, not rot, not incense, not null. It is the smell of an old orchard. It reminds him of the vault soil he ate. A new voice uses old syllables and makes them patient. Grandfather offers through a crack in the spire they are abandoning. The offer is not a contract. Nurgle does not contract. He adopts. "Come into my greenhouse," says the warmth at the back of his grin. "You love age. I am time's gardener. Your pocket leaks where clean cut touched it. Let me line it with moss and you will never leak. You will never starve. I have all the prayers that beg in the right key." He tastes the offer. It is sincere. That is the seduction. Sincerity is a spice he rarely gets. He imagines Pilgrim furred with green, its doors soft, its corners rounded by affection. He imagines hunger turning from a knife into a chair he can sit in whenever he wants. He could stop chasing and let fear come to him as a kind of pilgrimage. He refuses with the only tool he trusts, contempt, not for gifts, but for ease. He does not want a father whose love declines to change. He loves the twitch, the little crisis before people kneel or run. He loves the difference between no and not yet. A greenhouse is a room with one temperature. He spits the orchard taste back into the crack and hears flies applaud. The price is immediate. The clean wound along his side yawns 2 fingers wider, as if a gardener sulked and slammed a door. Pilgrim lurches. A culvert he was using to drag rot away from a refugee line collapses. A tongue of green water breaks out and slaps the floor near a line of penitent flagellants. It touches one. He starts to sing forgiveness in a key that will explode bells. The sacristan sees it. She puts her censer into his stomach and folds him with a skill she did not have yesterday. He loses his breath but not his life. The tongue passes. The bell does not detonate. He will hate her later and join a stricter penance order to show her he can hate without sinning. The old man sags against a column. The brand flares, and for the first time since the Nulls' touch, he wonders not if he will die. He has died plenty, but if he will die and stay bored. The thought surprises him so much, he nearly says it out loud. He does not have an audience he trusts for that sentence yet. He files it as a morsel for when he meets a bigger door. Sacred intervention comes dressed as administration, as it often does here. A palatine procession edges into the quarter. Gilded carriers, reliquary bearers, a choir that still remembers Latin the way bones remember salt. At its center, beneath a baldachin stitched with stars, a relic of the Emperor's own sainted guardsman, no one agrees which, arrives under orders sent the day before by men who will never smell this city. The relic is the saint's pauldron, set upon a staff. It is dinged and unpretty. The crowd parts like cloth. It passes the old man and makes Pilgrim flinch. The brand throbs in time with the staff-bearer's steps. The pauldron does not heal anyone. It does not kill anything. It does something worse. It writes a schedule onto the air. It tells everyone present that there is an appointment up ahead, where all this will be tallied by someone who can look the old man in the teeth and not blink. Thane watches the pauldron and nods once. She hears the same calendar click. She reads it as mandate, not mercy. "We go," she says. "We go now. while the choir gropes and the guard has not yet decided we are an embarrassment worth correcting. Holt signs 3 quick withdraw advance orders that will be used by men who do not know the names of the streets they die on. Aladis selects a squad to remain and refuses to let any sister argue. Staying is a privilege. Margot Solo tells the Lattice he loves it and means it, and then instructs it to take a series of planned humiliations so ships can leave. The vigil reconfigure around the old man like a puzzle box, snapping tighter. Caff Null steps close and lets his field brush the brand. The brand warms like a hand under a door. He says, "You will run if we look away." The old man lifts his face so the skull helm can see the grin in full. "Try to run me the wrong way," he says. "See what happens to maps." "Maps will survive you," Caff Null says. "They were written for someone else." He means it as comfort. It lands like law. They thread the evac toward a spaceport slate yard that was pilgrim housing yesterday and is now a runway. The choir pounds at edges, still singing, still planting little gardens in drains. Nurglings chase wheels. A great unclean one peers from a crater like a drunk peering into a party. He can no longer fit in and laughs until entrails slip out of a tear that heals itself, because love is sticky. The vigil's quiet dries laughter into cough. The unclean one does not mind. He has always liked coughs. He reaches and the hand withers at the wrist where it nears Caff Null, not from hate, from lack. He giggles because lack is a punchline he respects. Transports line up like apologies. A navy frigate hangs on a tether of light overhead. Captains gambling their careers that letting an inquisitor on board with a mouthful of trouble will be praised later. Thane walks up a ramp with a stride that says she has memorized the pieces of this world she is taking responsibility for. Holt pauses at the bottom to turn and look. He's not sentimental. He's checking his work. He sees the sacristan tying a sling for a boy who broke his arm, refusing to leave a statue. He sees Aladis blessing a squad with the quick, irritated tenderness of a woman combing a child's hair before school. He sees a vigil sister stand as if nothing could ever surprise her again, and he believes her. The old man pauses because he has never boarded a ship with permission. It feels wrong to walk into an enclosed geometry that will take him somewhere. He prefers to be the thing that makes rooms new. Pilgrim rolls against the clean wound like a dog against the smell of something it does not understand. The brand tugs forward like a leash. He steps. The ramp clangs like a held note on a xylophone made of hull. On board, compartments smell like oil and the kind of cleanliness that knows it has murder to do. Naval ratings stare and get on with their work. The captain salutes Thane and does not ask questions, because being alive later is more interesting when you do not know which question killed you. Margot Solo plugs into a port and sings to the ship in a voice like a tin animal. Canoness Aladis drops her bolter like a suitcase by a bulkhead and closes her eyes for exactly 30 heartbeats, counting, then opens them. Reset. The old man finds a corner with rivets and listens to them talk. He hears rivets tell stories about pressure and release. He hears gravity playing with weight like a cat. He hears Caff Null not breathing. He hears the city below continue to be argued over by bells and mud. The ship lifts. Gathalamor drops away like a guilty thought you promised to revisit. The Basilica Quarter looks small, like a cut healed with too much scar. The spire is a ragged tooth. The reliquary staff moves through the streets like a memory of parade. The choir makes one last sour note and then quiet like a large animal realizing it is tired. They break atmosphere. The void comes in polite through sanctioned windows. The Astronomicon hums as if only ships can hear it. The brand in the old man's side hums a discord that would hurt a musician's pride. He likes it because he has never embarrassed a lighthouse before. In orbit, the Navy picket bows because the Inquisition's transponder lets it bow without losing face. A chart lights up. Warp tides, traitor wakes, silent zones, routes. Thane chooses a line that threads between a quiet made by something unnamed and a noise made by a star too interested in itself. The navigator's third eye opens where no one can see and finds the stitch. Null stands beside the old man while clamps bite shut and prayers skid under the hull like eels. "You will be judged," the Null says, not angry. "We will end you if the throne nods." The old man looks at him and sees, for the first time, that under the skull there is a man who has been quiet so long he has become the quiet he wears. He feels an odd respect that has teeth. "And if it doesn't," he asks, "then you will carry rules," Null says. He says it the way a woodcutter says axe. The old man tilts his head and feels the brand pull, a small index finger tapping his side in a rhythm that is also a march. He thinks of halogen knives and humming boxes and a girl with wrists like litany. He thinks of rooms he has owned and rooms that made him polite. He thinks of doors. The warp opens like skin stretched by experience. The ship shudders and chooses to believe this is safe. Pilgrim shivers and decides to be brave because it tastes interesting. The Vigil's null aura tightens around the old man until his edges find themselves against something they cannot smear. He finds the feeling restful in a way that alarms him. Below, Gathalamore keeps smelling like worship and bleach. Above, the ship draws a chalk line through someone else's storm. He smiles and lets a little rust fall in the passageway, because he will not give them a clean deck yet. The brand throbs a reminder that some dirt is now scheduled. He accepts the schedule without admitting it's why he stops. Inquisitor Thane looks out a porthole at a star she will never meet and allows herself to be certain for exactly a moment. "Terror," she says under her breath, as if the name is a door opening for no one. He hears it, and for the first time since stepping out of a wall in a church, the word home occurs to him as a joke that might be worth telling later. They cross the point where prayer becomes calculation, and calculation becomes blind. The ship enters that math with grace because too many people have told it to. The old man waits. It is not something he likes to do. It is something he is beginning to learn has a taste. It tastes like a room on the other side of a door that does not make sense until you step through. He sits with hunger, folded like a coat over his arm, and lets the brand keep time. And in the distance, a throne that is also a man, that is also a lie that keeps the lights on, turns its attention a fraction, not enough to change anything yet, just enough to mark the file. He smiles wider, because being noticed is a kind of corridor. The ship hums like a cathedral remembering how to breathe underwater. Hatches seal and prayers click through cogitators. In the belly, Medicae rigs triage sisters and soldiers with ointments that smell like saints' closets. The vigil stand without blinking. Null is a whole candle slide around. In the chapel, Thane kneels not because she doubts, but because some laws are made on your knees. Canoness Aledis sits on a bench because she has learned how to bleed without falling. Holt stands because he does not want to learn that lesson yet. Magos Errant Solo occupies a corner like a hymn played on tin. Incense threads his cabling. The sacristan puts her censer down and massages her wrists, looking at the smoke as if it has instructions in it. "Cost," Thane says, voice low and stripped of decoration. "We bought a quarter with heretics. We bought time with a thing that eats time. We bought passage with faith we have not yet tested. Dogma says we should not have paid any of that." Aladis answers. Dogma was not at the basilica steps. She does not make apology a habit and does not start now. Holt glances at the old man half shaded in the chapel's side niche. a shape of peeling pitch and grin that refuses to quit. The brand at his side shows through like a confession on paper held to light. "I do not like the ledger," he says. "I do like being alive enough to make one. The lattice will not forgive us for bending," Solo murmurs. "But lattices are made to bear load." Cafnel faces the altar without looking at any god on it. "Ends are not ours," he says, and means it as architecture. The sacristan surprises herself by speaking in a room where no one keeps her name written down. "We told children to sing," she says. "It was right. It was terrible. It would be terrible not to say both." Thane nods, because that is exactly the sentence she needed someone else to say. "We are not absolved," she answers. "We are simply moving." The ship's lighting clicks. A navigator's habit signal, and the chapel's icon lamps dim one notch. Gravity leans an inch, then remembers dignity. The warp opens ahead like ice being pushed under itself by a keel. The navigator majoris, Heliane, third eye bandaged with legal cloth, takes them into the stitch. The old man walks pilgrim along the lower decks, oil-smelling corridors where ratings swear in dialects that taste like iron and tea. He slides fingers along bulkheads, letting rust drift, feeling where the brand tugs like a leash tied to some patient mast. He does not touch a single rating. He does not promise he won't later. He tests a door, and it refuses to be a door under the vigil's watch. He respects refusal when it is new. Midday, in the ship's math, sirens do not sound. Something abates instead. Conversations lose their last words. Dials fail to commit to numbers. The warp quiets, not like a calm, but like a courtroom when the judge enters. The navigator's breath hitches and then goes very regular. Cafnel's aura tightens without him deciding. Thane's Crocs pattern wards warm in her sleeve. The old man feels Pilgrim raise its hackles in a universe that has none. A corridor ahead widens without moving. Doors lose their seams. Brass shines a little, as if polished by absence. A figure long and pale steps into view, as if printed there and then cut out around the edges. Austere lines, a face like a mask made from patience, robe stitched from clauses. Behind it, geometry repeats, with the smug joy of a pattern that finally found its teeth. "Stay," Aladis says, and means the word for more than one thing. Thane steps forward, rosette raised like a thought. "Identify," she says, because naming is power when nothing else holds. It inclines its head with courtesy sharpened to a point. "Warden," it replies, "of the Pale Vault, keeper of rooms promised forever, made from errors that learn to stand." Its voice carries the effect of seals pressed to wax and never lifted. Cafnel's skull turns a fraction. The air aches around his hand. "Oubliette construct," he says. "Anathema architecture, unauthorized." The warden looks at him without disdain. "Authorized by necessity," it says. The warp shivers at that, because necessity issues permits in this sea. Its gaze moves to the old man. The eyes are not eyes, they are inventories. "You are a leak," the warden tells him. "You spend appetite on curiosity. You lose yield." "You are a room that ate its keys," the old man answers. "You mistake the habit of closing for wisdom." The warden does not smile. "I'm an optimization," it says. "Join. Fuse your culvert to my corridors. Become penitential architecture. Feed on the condemned by the rhythm of law. No more waste, no more wandering, no more failures that scream and teach you nothing." The ship's chapel hums under their feet, and everyone hears in their bones the cold seduction of efficiency. Thane's mouth goes flat, not at the offer, but at how tempting it is to write something like this into a footnote and pretend it is mercy. Aladis's hands flex around an imaginary bolt pistol. Holt watches the shadow lengthening and evaluates a line of fire traps that make no sense here. Margot Solo whispers heresy, like an equation with a wrong sign, and allows himself to be angry. Cafnol takes one step that subtracts argument. Declined, he says. The warden observes the brand at the old man's side. Light is not his preferred text. Law is. It reads anyway. A mark, it says. A condition. You are already written upon. Better to be written correctly. The old man's wound throbs in time with words he has not agreed to yet. He tilts his head, tasting his own revulsion and curiosity mixed like two wines that never plan to meet. Show me, he says. 2 words, both honest. Neither promise. The warden obliges, as if manners are a sacrament. The corridor opens into a room that cannot fit here. A masked gallery of doors repeating toward an impossible vanishing point. Each door has a plaque. Each plaque has a name and a sentence and a date written as a prayer. The air smells of preserved breath. He walks with Cafnol's null field like a wind at his shoulder, keeping Pilgrim's edges from licking at that smoothness. He sees a door with a plaque that reads, "A man who crushed children for efficient breadlines." He sees one for a translator who lied about a treaty to keep her lover safe. He sees one for a warlord who believed mercy should be taxed. The doors hum with the same note. Quiet forever. "Open one," the warden says, courteous. "Eat. Tell me you do not prefer this taste to fear snagged off a church floor." The old man touches a handle and it retracts because the handle has learned to hate hands. He laughs. He opens anyway, because doors are nothing but failure rehearsed until it fits. Inside is a corridor with turns that refuse surprise. At its end, a man, alive, kneeling, saying the same 3 sentences over and over in a voice that keeps choosing correctness instead of relief. He puts his palm on the man's head, and Pilgrim opens at his finger's tip. The pocket tastes the kneeling and stiffens. It drinks. No fear, no flight. Just scheduled repentance, compressed into a shape his appetite can swallow without chewing. It is pure. It is ash. It is efficient. He steps back and shows his teeth to the warden as if confessing. "It is a food that feeds nothing but itself," he says. "I would stall there. I would become furniture." "Furniture supports," the warden replies. "It keeps rooms true. You would become useful." The sacristan is at the corridor's mouth, pulled by a bad habit called doing the right thing, too close to the wrong things. Her eyes are wide, wrists firm. She sees rows of doors for sinners with labels neat enough to stroke. She wants to believe in neat. She makes herself hate it. She whispers a prayer that is mostly a badly remembered psalm and a very exact please. Pilgrim twitches. The brand stings. The warden notices. "Sanctioned," it says softly. "Already half-owned." It extends a palm that is a doorway's shadow. "Come while you can choose," it adds, which is generous and terrible together. Cafnol stands so close now the air around his helm corrugates. "He will choose when the throne speaks," he says, "not before." "Your throne is a chair older than your sarcasm," the warden answers. It turns its face back to the old man. "You have always admired rooms that know their purpose. Be one." Aladis's voice cuts, flat as a blade. "Your vaults smell like cowardice," she says. "You make sins quiet to tidy your book." Holt does not let himself agree the way he wants to. "You also make transport cheap," he says, "and I have spent too much to sneer at cheap." Thane steps between geometry and offer, rosette up like a coin on an altar. "We move to judgment," she says. "Not above it, not below it. If what you offer is useful, it will be written after a hand you do not recognize nods, not before." The warden inclines its head because courtesy is the only language it truly speaks. It does not move. "A demonstration then," it says. so the throne sees you make your own argument. Its hand unfolds into lines. Lines crisp into coupons of space. Coupons flit and slap against Pilgrim's flank, suction cups made of oaths. The pocket lurches. Doors slide toward alignment with doors not his. Cafnol moves like silence turns to spear. His field peels oaths off Pilgrim and throws them into a gutter reality does not recall. The Warden's lines adapt, rewriting themselves into geodesics that do not rely on warp traction. It laces a lattice across Pilgrim's stress, polite, inexorable, and capable of turning an animal into infrastructure. The old man answers with ungentle invention. He digs a door into the deck beneath him, where no one told him a door could go. He opens into a crawl space of memory, where a girl swung a sensor and refused to cry. He pulls that refusal up like rebar. Pilgrim grips. The brand burns, the kneeling person door sigil going white hot along the clean wound. It hurts in an honest way, the kind that does not interest him and therefore he trusts. The Warden's geometry narrows. It chooses a corner, makes it canonical, begins to write Pilgrim there. Cafnol's palm meets his palm, null against ordnance. Law tears in sheets no ear can hear. The corridor shutters like a heart remembering its job. Thane points, and a sister snaps a null seal reliquary case open. The reliquary is dull, battered, and graced by neglect. She raises it like a censer with no smoke. The air goes colder. Seals stamp themselves on space for the length of a breath. The navigator gasps. Her third eye rolls under legal cloth. "Look," she says, which is a strange order from someone who usually begs people not to. Outside the hole, through the bridge's blessed glass, the Astronomicon spears the warp like a column of intention. It throws a line, not to them specifically, but to anyone who can remember a straight path. The line brushes the ship. The reliquary hums as if wanting to join a choir. The Warden watches the color of that light change none of its choices and steps backward anyway, because even optimizers recognize mandates when they meet one that does not ask. "Reach the throne," a latest breeze. A glad order disguised as piety. The Warden pales further, like chalk acquiescing to soap. "It will ask you to build me anyway," it says without heat. "You will need me when you tire." It folds into the corridor's new politeness and is gone like a parent leaving a room while children pretend they chose to keep playing. Pilgrim sags. The brand cools to ache. Cafnol's field remains braced for a foe that evaporated and does not relax. This is not a man who lets muscles think for themselves. Thane exhales and names 8 people to write depositions no one will read, because that is how you hold the line between myth and procedure. Margot Solo puts both hands to a bulkhead and hums a machine spirit lullaby until the ship stops acting like it wanted to buck. Holt orders water, sleeping rotations, replacement of seals, inspection of pallets, as if victory can be boxed up and distributed without spilling. The sacristan picks up a censer and keeps her wrists firm, though her hands shake later in a storage bay where she allows herself exactly 40 tears and then is done because schedule saved. They arrive within sight of the greatest wall. Terror is neither beautiful nor comforting. It is simply too true. The planet fills the forward ports with armor and scab, oceans like pewter, capillaries of light around continents. Above, a lattice of war satellites and cardinal stations glitters like frost. The palace is not a building. It is geography that learned manners. It drapes mountains in stone, grows spires like verdicts, puts roads in places where mountain gods would have refused. Navy vox lanes unfurl like scrolls. Their clearance codes melt locks meant for other ships. Black ships drift at formal distances, escorted by custodes' silent craft that shine like honest knives. Choir barges moan in minor keys. Astropathic traffic scratches parchment that isn't there and is. The vigils straighten, as if their bones remember this sky. Cafnal is not moved, or is moved, and refuses to show it. They descend with a guard of things that do not need to be named aloud to matter. A landing field the size of a principality yawns, paved with prayer. The ship kisses it. Ramps unfold like liturgy tutored to be quick. Air tastes like law and burned incense and something older than both. People recite without realizing it. The old man breathes, and Pilgrim flinches against a pressure that is not null and is not plague. It is expectation turned into architecture and pointed at him. They are met by pageantry and weapons. Custodians advance in oromite, each a man-shaped claws ending in spear and storm. Their helms turn like museum pieces that could decapitate you if etiquette requires. Sisters of Silence already own this place and wear it correctly. Their matriarch makes the sign for contain and respect in the same gesture, and no one mistakes which one comes first. Thane steps down with rosette extended, and every gift of politeness a weapon can teach someone who grew up to carve orders into obstinate worlds. Holt comes down scowling because awe wastes time. Arladis sees the palace and feels smaller in the useful way. This is what she fights for when fighting cannot be a personal noun. Margot Solo bows to a machine spirit choir arranged along the field's edge. The sacristan's breath catches, the scale squeezes breath sweet, and then she keeps moving because, in big rooms, little tasks matter more. Cafnal pivots toward the old man. The vigils shift, and their null wall hardens. The brand at his side burns, then cools, then warms, like it has learned when it is supposed to speak. He considers slipping into the ramp's underside to feel the flesh of the palace through his teeth. He does not try. The ground refuses to be a door with a contempt so absolute it counts as compliment. They are walked up corridors broad enough to carry definitions. Vaulted ceilings make choir stalls of flags. Statues look down with exhausted pride. A priest shuffles sideways to clear the path, then recognizes Thane's rosette and steps into it instead, head down, because this is how you pray when prayer becomes paperwork. They pass a window cut to assure generals the sky exists. They pass through fields of dampened air that taste like a choir chewing on iron. The old man feels Pilgrim compress along his brand to fit through unseen frames. He insists on expanding at the moments when men in armor pretend not to notice. It is a kind of petty rebellion. It keeps him present in his own skin. A gate looms, simply designed, covered with the kind of wards that have learned how to be quiet and terrifying concurrently. Custodians take positions without needing to speak. The vigil of Quietus halt at a sign older than the palace's masonry, a line where no one with their gifts steps beyond without invitation. The custodian at point inclines his helm by degrees. Audience, he says. Not voice, not eyes. Be as you are. He will be as he is. Thane breathes out and lets eyes close. Holt breathes in and holds it, because men always think discipline looks like deprivation. Ledis makes the sign of the Aquila with fingers that hurt and does not ask for anything. Solo's incense gutters and goes out at the edge as if embarrassed. Cafnal stands as if he has been here before. The sacristan clasps her censer and whispers please to no one and everyone. They enter a hall that does not need tapestries, because its stones remember the weight of banners, and the banners remember the weight of fists tied around poles. They approach a dais that is and is not a dais. Thrones are for men. This is for a will too large to sit. The air crackles like a winter morning, every breath visible. Light pours from a point no eye can name. It is not gold, It is burden made visible. The old man feels Pilgrim fold, not crush, fold. Corners touch that have never met. Doors line up. The brand burns along the clean wound until he thinks he will learn the pattern by heart. He tries to open a door at his own feet and finds only a page with writing he cannot see. He grins because fear tastes like this when it is honest. Sharp, simple, immediate. The exchange is not language. Language would be disrespect. He has shown himself in one move. Halogen knives, a box humming at a key that finds teeth in the back of his head, a door drawn with chalk in a cell he wore like a shirt, a girl with wrists firm under weight, a city learning to sing without choking, a Null's hand meeting his palm and forcing him to see the map of his own edges. He is shown rooms he could become, vault, blade, corridor, in which men come out different. He is shown rooms he will not be allowed to be, nursery, throne, mirror. He does not kneel. He cannot. Kneeling is a sentence he has never learned to conjugate, but he does stop pretending he is the only shape in the conversation. His grin thins to something like readiness. The others do not hear what he hears. They are given different audits. Thane tastes the iron in the law she has sworn to guard and is forgiven for loving it too much. Aladis feels her prayer carve a path that does not end in mercy and sees it labelled as duty by someone whose handwriting makes duty a virtue. Holt sees a ledger he can't carry and is told to leave it on the steps when he needs to, and to hate himself less slowly. Cafnal hears nothing and rejoices, because silence is the only answer he believes in. The sacristan hears her wrists praised for firmness and is ashamed of being proud and then permitted to be. The light shifts by a degree. It feels like a nod. The custodian lowers his spear. The vigil's matriarch draws nearer than the sign says she should, and is not rebuked because she has earned it with a century of emptying rooms of nightmares. An attendant in robes without ornament steps forward. He holds a case cut from some extinct animal's hide and opens it as if offering bread. Inside, seals, each tied to someone's responsibility. One bears the sigil of the Silent Sisterhood, cut so spare it could be a wound in paper. One bears an inquisitorial letter with cold on it. One bears the ecclesiarchy's baroque swirl, tempered by a chip off one saint's pauldron. One bears a cogwheel whose teeth have been sharpened to points. One bears no sign, only weight. Thane takes the letter because that is her right and her grief. The vigil's matriarch lays fingers near the wound sign and leaves them there until the air around her sighs in relief to be allowed to feel. Aladis does not touch the ecclesiarchy seal. She stands witness only. Solo inclines toward the cog, with the respect he saves for hammers. Cafnal does not select. He has nothing to take. He's allowed to be here instead. The weight seal remains. It is meant for someone who does not do seals. It is meant to be placed, not worn. It will be placed on the old man when the decision is written on his skin. He watches it as a dog watches a hand that has never fed him, but might. Power scaling. Interlude. 2. Under the throne's gaze, Pilgrim contracts to a volume tethered to the brand's cadence. He can open a door only where consent has failed in the room. A lie told, a promise broken, a fear weaponized, and only if a null is not within 3 steps. He cannot feed on the pure at all. The brand flares and shrivels openings. He can drag corruption as a culvert if accompanied by a blank, but the culvert stings him with sterility. If he tries to open a door on holy ground without sanction, the seal burns and pins Pilgrim to the frame until a custodian unhooks it. They are dismissed without anyone being dismissed. The hall rolls them back as a tide rolls driftwood. It would rather keep, but should not. They are placed in an antechamber that exists so men can shake. No one shakes. Holt exhales and discovers he has a new love for chairs. A lady looks at her hands and finally cleans them, because a girl once watched. Solo takes apart an incense burner and puts it back together wrong on purpose to see if it still works. It does, which pleases him. The sacristan touches the floor with 2 fingers and whispers thanks for nothing in particular. Null stands at ease in a place where ease is a rumour he distrusts. Thane faces the old man. The rosette hangs like a star paused behind her shoulder. "You have been seen," she says. "We will now spend this sight." He turns his grin into something smaller to show he knows how to fit in a room when asked. "What will you purchase?" he asks. "Not absolution," she says. "Authority." She does not smile at the irony. He does not either. A custodian enters like a chapter ending. He gestures without wasting a muscle. They follow into a telescoping sequence of courtyards and cloisters, each tailored to make men think in a different meter. One for judging, one for preparing, one for remembering rope. They reach a smaller hall, panelled in wood from a world that no longer has trees. A table crouches under the weight of seals and precedent. 3 chairs stand behind it. One for a sister in black whose face is the shape of enough. One for a robed prelate with eyebrows like banners. One for a woman in plain grey with a pen that has killed men. Proceedings begin as proceedings always do here, with a recitation that is not prayer, but functions as one. Thane recites what was done in Cathalamo, what was lost, what was kept. She names the anomaly's deeds without adjectives. Aladis witnesses without embroidery. Holt testifies like a hammer describing nails. Solo explains the lattice and is forgiven for loving the lattice too much. Null says, contaminant, utility, hazard, retrievable. And the words move in the room like animals people should stop staring at. They let the sacristan speak, because someone had looked at her wrists. She says, "He did not eat the choir," and silence makes room for that to be the hinge it is. The old man stands without counsel because appetite never hires a lawyer. It prefers to represent itself. He shows the brands burn without flinching. He says nothing until the penwoman asks a question with the precision of a blade laid against the root of a tooth. "What do you want?" He feels 1,000 answers churn like soup going wrong. He chooses the one that tastes least like mercy and most like work. To keep eating, he says. To learn new doors. To be used as a drain when you are drowning instead of the sport. The sister in black nods once. So small, only other women used to standing in silence see it. The prelate almost smiles. He swallows it because a smile wastes authority. The penwoman writes one line. The table acquires weight. The decision does not declare itself today. That will be ritual when they need surgery. They are told what will follow. A sealing, a pilgrimage within the palace, a test in the presence, because the throne's nod was not a rubber stamp but an invitation, and then the seal placed or the scale lowered. They are dismissed with honor and suspicion braided correctly. There is an hour to sleep and an hour to be a person, and then duty lifts again. They walk out through air that has opinions. The old man feels Pilgrim measure corridors for faults and stops it because some measurements become self-fulfilling. The sacristan stops at a window and stares at a sky that thinks it is the ceiling of a building. She breathes in and out and teaches her heart not to gallop. Holt leans against a column and feels his back complain like an honest quartermaster. Aladis lays a hand on a statue's foot and does not ask for anything. Thanks would be excess. Night inside a palace that runs on time does not feel like night. It feels like a clean page placed on top of a ledger you have not finished filling. The vigil rests by not moving. Null stands with his skull tilted, as if listening to a language this rock invented. Mago Solo dreams of cogs that recite their grease recipes back to their owners. The old man dreams for once and does not like it and likes it. He dreams of rooms he will be, and rooms he will be denied. He dreams of the warden murmuring, "You will build me anyway." He dreams of a chair that is not a throne, placed in a room where he waits politely and is proud of that. He wakes with his grin set short and shows teeth to a corridor that does not consider them worth itemizing. They move again, morning or something like it. They are led through gardens that have never smelled dirt, through sacraria that hold dust like blood, past a staircase that rises exactly as far as guilt. At a crossing of halls sits a woman in robes that look like a blacksmith could pray. She wears a chain of office that would jerk a lesser neck off. She is a chancellor of doors. She holds the seal with no sign. Sanction is a chain, she says, not unkind to the old man. It is also a leash you can pull when your handler falls. We expect you to do both when correct. He tilts his head. If I eat the wrong man, he asks, because clarity here is worth an old brand's bite. You will be pulled to the floor and held there until the impulse rots, she says. If you save the unsavable by breaking a rule we did not remember to write, you will be scolded in public and thanked by mouths that cannot speak. You will learn to enjoy neither. He laughs without moving his lips. I have never liked praise, he says. It comes sugared. Good, she says. Sugar makes teeth weak. We like teeth. They are given attendants who are not servants but witnesses. They are taken to a chapel whose heir has murdered several emperors and kept praying. An anointed tech takes the brand in his gloved hands and uses a hammer made from a saint's anger to set a seal strand into it. It hurts in waves that carry memory. He thinks of a wrong bell in a tower. He thinks of a girl with wrists. He thinks of a box that hummed and knew his name by forgetting it. He screams without sound because the room takes the sound and uses it for power. Pilgrim contracts to a usefulness he hates and respects. He's told a list of rooms he may open and a longer list he may not. He's told where he will stand on battlefields and when. He is told the names of 3 inquisitors to obey and the names of 2 to ignore. He is told to avoid shrines unless summoned and to attend orphanages when not ordered. The latter is a joke he doesn't understand until later, and then he laughs like a door finally opening for the right person. He is told that if he touches terror with a door without a Null's palm on his wrist, the seal will brand him into honesty permanently. He touches the seal with 2 fingers and regains enough of himself to be content. They are led to a balcony of red stone overlooking a court where men train, as if training is most of life. Adeptus Custodes drill forms that make poets tired. Sisters pace squares chalked into temper like chess, where bishops took blood. The old man watches and calibrates his hunger to work. A servo skull flutters by, carrying a strip of parchment like a shy dragonfly. It pauses. Words on it unroll in air. It is not news. It is an appointment moving up, then back, then up again. Thane reads it and nods. We move to seal in the presence, she says. Bring your worst. Holt cannot leave his worst anywhere but his chest. Elidis polishes what is polishable and stares the rest into obedience. Solo braids 3 cables and whispers please into them. Not to deity, but to design. The sacristan finds a bucket, fills it, sets it by a lintel because someone will spill and a bucket saves a second and a second saves a life. Cafnal loosens his fingers and lets silence pool in his palms. They cross thresholds that make teeth itch. They pass between ranks of human blanks whose absence stacks like fine brick. The old man feels his edges bite into that quiet and stick. He walks anyway, because he is here to be less himself and see if the taste will kill him. The brand pulses. The seal glows dull as metal that learned the sun. They enter the chamber again, the one that is not throne but weight. It recognizes them with the indifference of a lighthouse. No one is special here. Everyone is accounted. He steps forward by a half pace, because no one else can. The vigil close in, not to cage, but to let him feel the limits they carry. Thane lifts her chin, a proud acknowledgement she'll sign her name under what happens. Holt stands, as if he could headbutt a concept if the concept gets insolent. Aledis plants boots. Solo closes a switch that opens a prayer. The sacristan keeps her wrists firm. The hall thickens like air about to score a scar. The brand burns. The seal's weight finds its slot. He watches the hands that place it, because he has learned hands matter more than eyes. The seal drops. His pocket compresses to a shape he can own without owning him. Doors sort themselves. A small culvert opens from the hall to Pilgrim and back, inert until permission flows. He is bound in a way that does not smell like cages. It smells like ropes used on ships, rough, hard-working, sometimes burned, sometimes cut, always replaced with better rope. He looks up into light that is not color and grins because he is still allowed to. He feels a word not said pass through him and leave behind a schedule. He hears a boy's choir miles away miss a note and correct it in time. He does not bow. He inclines, which is all he can do, and not lie. They are dismissed. Again, the hall does not say goodbye. It simply stops needing them. On the way out, a custodian, active as a statue, turns his helm the slightest measure toward the old man and not toward Thane. It is a gesture that says, "Remember, we are here when rope burns." It is not a threat. It is an inventory. In the antechamber, silence lasts 3 breaths and then dissolves into practicals because the world's belly is still hungry. Thane collects papers. Some write themselves. Holt requisitions a company that does not yet know it has been requisitioned and will be grateful later when gratitude is the difference between a meal and a story. A ladist writes a letter to a novitiate who will learn later why her suppliant's shoulders ache. Solo trims a cogitator's prayer wheel with a file that belonged to his master when his master still thought you could build things permanent. Calf Null assumes the posture of a man ready to work without asking whether work likes him. The sacristan considers her wrists, finds them as firm as when this began, and smiles as if given a medal she would never wear to meals. A vox chime skitters into the room, urgent as a mouse that learned what flame does to straw. It carries a packet with a cipher that smells like ash and old nights. Thane cracks it. Her eyes move left, right, left. They settle. "Orders," she says. A plague derelict is adrift rimward. Its choir is quiet. A cardinal world has asked for help it does not deserve. We will test our rope. Holt grins without meaning to. A ladist checks her magazine. Solo purrs. His cables love a challenge. Calf Null is a blade under leather. The old man tilts his head and feels Pilgrim shift within the bounds of the seal sets. He imagines doors that are now legal and feels an odd satisfaction that tastes like a nail hammered exactly straight. He looks toward the gate he could not open and feels no need to test it. He will have time for every wrong door later. For now, he has been given the oldest trick, a job. He turns without asking blessing. The palace lets him go because it does not hold tools. It holds debts, and he has just signed one. Outside, Terra's sky behaves with the discipline of a parade ground. Inside him, Pilgrim hums a new note. Rope against wood, wind against pennant, lungs full of cold. He likes it more than he wants to. They file toward ships, pageantry and purpose braided. Somewhere in the palace, a saint's pauldron sits on a shelf and tarnishes properly. Somewhere under the palace, a vault considers the warden's offer and writes a "not yet" that will last centuries. They reach a field of gold and ash, the vigil array. The null aura compresses and then eases as Cafnal glances down at a hand that has never trembled and is content with it. The sacristan swings her censer and finds the weight predictable. She keeps her wrists firm. He steps onto a ramp that took men to die with poems in their mouths and is pleased to be given a prose instrument instead. The seal warms once, reminding him of the schedule printed into his side. He pats it like a dog he refuses to name and looks up into a sky full of rules. He smiles. It sounds like a door he has not yet opened, clearing its throat. The frigate's hull whispers as clamps release. Air tastes sterilized and old. War prayers march under the deck plates. The brand at his side ticks like an impatient metronome. Pilgrim curls small and alert, a dog at heel. They burn for the rimwood derelict with a line etched across the void by men who license fear. The navigator sings math. The vigils stand like punctuation at the old man's flanks. Thane sleeps sitting up for 6 minutes, wakes with the same sentence on her tongue, and finishes it without apology. The warp lifts its head. The ship bows. In the moment of bowing, the light from no source turns and shows him a page. He is back beneath a sky made of schedules. The presence does not wear gold. It wears accountability. It does not speak. It offers. A door opens on the left. Inside, a slab of concrete painted the color of patience. Fluorescents fail with dignity. The hum lies. A chalk diagram on the floor shows a square with a dot in it, labeled home. There is a cot. There is an old metal calendar with no dates. The smell of halogen knives maps his mouth. He understands without being told. He can return. He can go back to small geometry, to a humming box and rituals whose costs are counted in one room. The taste of it is relief. The price is a slow theft. Every season the memory of the basilica, of wrists held firm, of a Nulls coin of void pressed to bone, would sand down. In a century he would be a rumor again. In two, an appetite without teeth. A door opens in the middle. Wind scours a platform high over a city whose silhouette bristles with doctrine and ductwork. Banners whip. Guns blink red. A crowd sways. He can walk among them as free appetite. No leash, no brand, no null. He would be adored by those who love fear as language. He would be hunted by those who love law as a ventilator. He would split wars like bread. He would make saints and monsters by accident. The price is schism drawn in his smile. Every choice a cut in someone else's church. He can be a knife. He cannot be a surgeon. A door opens on the right. A corridor he already knows as if his brand taught him the wallpaper. Ropes oiled by hard hands, null auras like cool wells, seals slotted like millstones. A leash, a schedule, a promise he will break on purpose sometimes and be caught and dragged and scolded in public and thanked in private. Work, ugly, honest. He feels his grin pull against skin as he looks down it. He hates how much he doesn't hate it. The presence does not argue. Choice is insulted by debate. He laughs because he can cry later. He points at the right-hand corridor and does not pretend it surprises him. The light leans an inch closer, the way dawn does when it has decided you are getting up whether you want to or not. The leash snaps into place. It is not iron. It is rope that knows knots. It bites and holds and gives. The brand blooms like a wound telling the truth. The room dissolves. The ship steadies. He opens his eyes to Cafnal's skull turned a degree toward him. The null does not ask. The answer is visible in posture. A predator who has agreed to pull a plow if the field is chosen correctly. Good, Thane says without permission to have heard any of that. She has a gift for reading rooms when they are men. We have a test coming, and I would like to cheat by calling it a proof. The derelict rolls in the void like guilt that forgot what it did. Its name is painted on its flank under scabs of blight, Saint Boscobel. Pilgrim tastes the paint and learns the ship was a pilgrim barge drafted into war and never forgiven. Choir barges cluster around it like dead bees. The Vox coughs with someone else's prayers. Auspex shows a diagram of infection that learned to calculate. They match vectors and spit a boarding tube with a kiss that bruises. The tube seals. The vigil go first. Silence peels air off metal. Hold squad follows, boots deciding to be doctrine. Aladis moves like a hammer taught to be diplomatic. Thane leads with the kind of decision that makes doors embarrassed about ever needing knobs. Inside is damp and dust that learn to sweat. Icons hang at angles and drip like sick fruit. The old man puts a palm on a wall and feels it try to learn his hand. He denies the lesson. The brand warms. The leash goes taut. Bodies lie arranged into a pattern that is either a prayer or a map. Mago Solo squints and chooses map, because prayers disgust him when they pretend to be engineering. He points. Core, he says. They have built a choir brain. They will sleep inside its math. They will wake when the note returns. He does not need to say who they are. They move through galleries where benches still remember hymns, where some water whispers to shoes about drowning, where shrines sprout lesions that look like fonts. Nurglings peek and retreat, because the vigil dried them by being near. Twice they find boxed children with mouths gagged by rosaries. They cut gags, give water, move on. Thane orders the children not to sing. Her voice makes it a sacrament they can keep. At the core, the choir brain rises like fungus wearing an organist's spine. Pipes loop into lungs of wet brass. The air thrums with a subsonic shudder that turns discipline into nausea. In the nodes sit men and women whose devotion has peeled into resignation. Their eyelids are stitched with cords. They breathe in time with a plague engine sleeping in the keel. The old man feels Pilgrim lean. The easiest path is always down, and always now. He could open and drink the choir clean in 3 swallows. The culvert would hold for 20 heartbeats without a null. 20 is enough. The brand burns bright as warning and as promise. Cafnol steps into his flank until the aura scrapes him into honesty. We do this together, the Null says, not as offer, but as law. Fine, the old man answers, because he knows a good angle when it bites. I will be your drain. You will be my blade. Aladis raises her hand. Conditions, she says. Her voice is tired and perfect. We save those who can walk. We end those who cannot be turned. We only burn what we cannot salt. Thane's gaze locks the room into a contract. Boundaries, she says, reciting as if from a decree already written. No feeding on the pure. No doors on holy ground without sanction. Culverts under Null escort only. The condemned first. The convenient only when documented as necessary and signed after by a voice that can still be ashamed. He recites it back, because saying is a promise he can despise later and still obey now. No pure, he says. No unsummoned doors. Culverts with silence only. The condemned first. He puts his palm to the hull and feels the relic of a chapel 2 decks down grow teeth. Shame after, he adds, and likes how the word tastes here. They go to work. Cafnol takes point, making a cone of subtraction toward the choir brain's wet heart. His presence shears off the song. The vigil lock shoulders. Their quiets overlap into a moving desert. Aladis and sisters strike where words fail. Holt's men lift and carry and shoot and do not think about which order is noble. Thane finds the command node, a lever disguised as a prayer book, and puts 3 bullets through its spine and 1 through the hand that tries to close it. The old man opens Pilgrim along the deck in a gutter shaped by law. The leash bites and steadies his hand. The brand hisses against heresy doing math at the edges. The culvert drinks, spores, stagnation, despair that has learned to be persuasive. He holds it, knuckles white for no reason. It hurts cleanly. He loves pain that tells the truth. At the core, a man half swallowed by the choir brain turns his head and mouths a word to the null. It is not a plea. It is end. Cafnol's fingers brush the man's brow. The man is erased, not insulted. The choir brain shudders, wakes and panics the way a machine can only when it has been taught to have a soul. It plays its last note. The note slides under the vigil silence and finds a seam. It climbs the old man's leash and tries to gnaw it. It runs across Aladis's tabard and writes an ache into bone. It touches Thane's rosette and learns to hate itself. It reaches down the ship's spine to the engine where plague has coiled like a thoughtful snake. The old man feels it get clever. He could drink faster. He could tear the culvert's mouth wider and let the whole room fall into Pilgrim. He looks at the children in their boxes, mouths ungagged but still quiet, because an inquisitor told them a new rule. Do not sing. He takes a longer pain. Hold, he says through his grin. The word tastes like rope. Hold. Cafnol's field thickens. The vigils shift and lock and make a little wall where the note comes through. Aladis plants her feet. Holt puts his shoulder under a beam, because sometimes beams fall, and sometimes they learn shame. Thane steps to the lever that is not a lever and lays her hand on it until it decides to be a lever. She pulls. The choir brain's breath stops. The note dies the way a lie does when nobody in the room needs it anymore. The culvert empties. Pilgrim sags against his leash and then stands up in it. The brand cools to ache. The rope burns. He breathes because he has learned that is a thing you can do without lying. They cut the stitched eyelids. The saved become people on their feet. The doomed are sent into the null shade and do not suffer. The choir brain slumps like a tent after a festival. Sisters kneel and pray with their rifles across their thighs. Holt writes names in a little book, even though nobody told him to. Margos Solo tells the plague engine it did good work once and that it is forgiven, and then orders it into scuttle. The deck lurches. Outside, a barge bristles with pustule lanterns and studs the void with blight. A hulking shape detaches, lord of contagion in plate, hung with bells and bad news. Vox clouds hiss liturgies of infection. The pestilent choir did not die. It followed its hearts. Its champion's Vox name rasps across channels like cut rope. Drudge Sovereign Tefel. He brings shells full of gardens. Holt's jaw sets because he had hoped to leave without poetry. Aladis smiles without humor and checks her sights. Thane swears by 3 saints who would forgive her later. Cafnol turns his skull and a cone of empty steps into space. The old man grins because simple fights are sweet. The barge opens openings in the St. Boscobel's flanks and starts to feed it. The Nulls' aura starves the tide nearest the breach. Elsewhere, infection climbs. 2 choices, Holt says, because that is one more than most men get. We run and take our saved and call it a win, or we cut the chain now and leave this ship a clean ghost. Thane looks at the old man. Culvert, she says, but the hard way. He nods. He knows which way she means. The culvert that hurts. The one under the Null's palm every step. The one on a leash. Conditions, Aladis repeats. Patient as gravity. If the rope snaps, you shoot me, he says evenly. You shoot until doors learn to lie the other way. Cafnol sets his palm against the brand. It is not affection. It is engineering. The seal warms between their skins. The old man opens Pilgrim along the spinal corridor of a ship and laces it to waste intakes, to vents, to stained prayers. He drags Plague into his pocket, and Pilgrim tolerates it because the Null keeps it honest. He drags too much, and the leash strips skin. He drags enough. Drudge Sovereign Tefl boards like a parade float that forgot to smile. He squeezes into the spine and calls everything grandchild. His bell totems make the air buckle. He swings a man-reaper with all the gentleness of industry. He smells like a pantry in heat. Aledis meets him at knees. Sisters lock a hymn and turn it into muzzle memory. Holzer Melter teams treat him as a bridge that needs to be shorter. Thane puts the rosette under his jaw and lets him understand his name from the inside out. He laughs because he loves everything that happens to him. He will not stop. Cafnal steps into his range. The laughter starves. The bell mouths fill with dust. The man-reaper's arc becomes geometry without encouragement. The Null's silence cuts sound into quieter pieces. The old man watches for the gap and finds the place where a god's mathematics assumed men would behave like plants. He goes through the floor like a man who knows where the nails are. He surfaces under Tefl's supporting foot and does something he has learned from men who climb. He takes the weight's honesty and moves it a half-inch to the left. Tefl's ankle makes a sound like a cathedral deciding to be a quarry. He buckles. Aledis takes the throat and does not ask permission, because the world is already full of permission and needs more decisions. The barge reverses. Plague lanterns gutter in embarrassment. The choir that came to dine finds itself standing in a scullery with the sink empty and the knives inconvenient. They cut their losses by leaving worship in their wake. Booby-trapped prayers, seeded guilt. Holt has men with mops for that. Margus Solo writes a litany that flushes contrition without humiliation. The vigils sweep the corridors clean by their mere walk. They run the saved back through the tube. The hull gives a little. Ships that are forgiven too much rarely hold. The St. Boscobel peels away from its own name as they detach. It turns slowly to face a star it loved, and then, with a small internal apology that only those who listen for such things can hear, kills itself into pieces. In the blossoming wreck, no gardens flower. They set course for the cardinal world that asked for help too late. The plea is a smear of vox tears with a seal so ornate it forgets to mean anything. Thane sends a reply that is equal parts law and mercy. The mixture tastes like sanded wood. On the transit, the leash does not loosen. It learns him. He learns it. When he reaches for an easy door, it pulls. When he chooses the hard culvert, it rides. He eats what he is given to eat, and when he asks for more, the Null's palm presses and the rope complains. He has never been so tired. He has never been so useful. They break into a sky of spires like needles making lace over a fever. The cardinal world, Orison's gate to those who need poetry, glitters with denial. Its processional roads are empty. Its mass bells toll on delay. Its cardinals argue over which reliquary can be burned without going to hell. A palace not as large as Terra's tries to remember how to kneel. They do not ask permission. They land where the plague's hand has written its initials. The vigils step out. Silence stalks into alleys. Aledis plants sisters at the corners of markets where bread used to be. Holt's men turn parade grounds into quarantine rings. Margos Solo explains to a red-robed prelate that machine spirits do not accept indulgences, and the prelate asks if they can buy candles instead, and Solo says yes, because he is not a monster. The old man opens a culvert along the edge of a hospital. The leash burns, the rope bites. He pulls and pulls and pulls. He pulls until his grin becomes a line with teeth. He pulls until the brand sings under Cafnol's hand like a string too tight to be trusted. He refuses the easy food, a ward of infants crying in a key that would fill him for days. He refuses because he remembers a girl with wrists firm and a choir door left shut. He refuses because shame is part of the story he has agreed to write. He eats the condemned, the cult cell in the basement that thought it could buy mercy by being loud. The cardinal's nephew who tried to sell a vaccine schedule in exchange for a title. The 3 men who brought plague through a gate on purpose to punish wives. He opens doors under their feet and lets regret fall. He counts each. He keeps count. He empties drains where no drain should be. He watches nurses swallow anger and go back to work without compliments because compliments waste time. He watches a boy carry water and not spill because someone taught him. He watches a priest hold a hand and say nothing and do it right. He eats where eating gives other people enough hours. Thane's voice becomes a ledger that does not humiliate. "We will burn this chapel," she says to a prelate who has never loaded a flamer. "You will stand and pray while we do. You will not move. You will not forgive us. You will mark this day in a book." Aledis's hymn changes key. Her sisters do not blink. Holt writes an order and then refuses to sign it because he wants the man who closes the last door to be able to pretend that he chose without help. Magos Solo charms the lattice to fail in the order he planned under Terra. Cafnol remains a hole around which plague makes mistakes. The rope burns through skin. The brand blisters clean. Pilgrim snarls when he forces it to swallow a pocket of hate without fear attached. He does it anyway and discovers something alarming. He is learning to like the taste. At dusk, the sky stops roaring. Plague smoke lifts and shows a layer of stone that has remembered its names. Bells toll accidentally in tune. A line of children sing because somebody told them to, and the sound draws a real wind through streets that had run out of air. The cardinal world does not deserve to be saved. It is saved anyway, at least in the places where work can reach. He steps into a cloister where the sacristan from Gathalamor waits with a basin and a cloth because somebody always learned how to do this in a house like hers. He puts his rusted hands in the water. The water turns grey. The brand glows. The leash warms like an animal settling at night. "Wrist firm?" he asks, because he is allowed to tease one person. "Wrist firm," she says, and shows him the chain. Her hands do not shake. He feels something small and bright and disobedient in his pocket sit up. It is not hunger. It is a thing like pride filtered through contempt until it tastes like work. Thane approaches with the seals. Cafnor stands to her left, skull forward, hand open. Aledis to her right, tabard scorched, jaw set. Holt behind, tired and measuring himself against tables that will be put away tonight. Magos Solo humming to a relay to keep it patient. The sacristan remains, because someone looked at her wrists. 3 paths are over, Thane says. Voice not for crowds. Now comes the part where we pretend we wrote the road. "I like roads," he says. "They taste like choices made by people who did not trust themselves and ended up being right." "Then hear it," she says, and the war writes a contract without ceremony. "You are sanctioned as Pilgrim Knife," she says. "Seconded to the Ordo Sepulturum. Escort, the Vigil of Quietus. Lead blank, Cafnol. Authority to open culverts when accompanied by a blank and when signalled by a rosette. Custodian, or canoness. No doors on holy ground without seal song. No feeding on the pure. The brand will rot any door opened in a lie. You will submit to inventory weekly. You will return to Terra when summoned. You will save more than you eat, or we will close you with a love that does not require your consent." He listens like a man being taught his own name for the first time. He repeats each clause. He does not stumble. At love that does not require your consent, he grins. It is the first time he has heard love defined correctly. Add mine, Adeptus says. When a sister tells you to stop, you stop. When she tells you to push, you push. When she tells you to kneel, you find some other way to show obedience because we both know that word fights you. I kneel like this, he says, and inclines a degree exactly polite enough to count. She allows it. Cafnal lifts his hand. One more, he says. You will carry a rule that is yours, not ours. Speak it. He thinks. He thinks of halogen, of hum, of wrists, of choir doors. He thinks of a warden who wanted furniture. He thinks of a god who wears a star. He chooses the smallest rule and therefore the hardest. I will not eat a child's fear, he says, not even to hold a culvert. The brand burns a degree brighter and then cools. The leash slackens a finger width and then tightens as if in approval. Thane nods once and it is binding. The seal with no sign is pressed to his wound. It fuses without smoke. It prints a shape into rust, a small door ajar inside the wings of the double-headed sigil. It looks like a man kneeling and a hinge forgiving itself. It hurts for a heartbeat in a way that has no metaphor. Then it becomes simply true. The air shifts. The city exhales. Somewhere a very old woman stops coughing long enough to laugh. Somewhere a reliquary tarnishes with satisfaction. Somewhere, in a vault under terror, a warden writes a neat, not yet, and stores it on a shelf with other defeats. He steps back and the vigil step in. Wall without cage. Thane lowers her rosette. Adeptus rests her gauntlet on his shoulder with the precise weight of acceptance and warning. Holt does not shake his hand because they are not that kind of men. He nods in the old way sailors do when the sea has stopped arguing with them for a minute. Margos Solo says nothing and oils a hinge. The sacristan wrings the cloth and hangs it over a hook. They leave Orison's gate with fewer dead than expected and more rules than any of them enjoy. The warp opens like an honest wound. The ship bows and is forgiven. He sits in a corridor and listens to rivets discuss the ethics of metal. The leash curls on his skin like an animal that has learned his smell. News moves faster than ships when men need it to. Underhive gang preachers tell a story about Saint Rust, who eats rot when you ask him with wrists firm. Death Guard, Vox Canticles spit his name as a profanity and an odd compliment. The warden of the Pale Vault adds the corridor to his gallery labelled Pilgrim Knife, pending. An Ordo Hereticus Lord writes a letter expressing concern that an anomaly has been given a seal. He stamps it and then uses it to level a table, and the letter forgives him because tables are important. A child in a tenement learns to keep water steady in a cup and grins a little when she doesn't spill. He dreams one more time without permission. He is a corridor. Men run through and live. Some die, and it is not his fault for once. He wakes and tastes the new thing sitting in Pilgrim like a coin. The void peels back. Terror hangs distant and disinterested. Other worlds spin with their own problems. Pages are hungry. He stands on the embarkation ramp as if it were a church step. The seal warms once, not as correction, but as reminder that schedules make the day. The vigil formed the old shape. Thane writes orders in her head she will not apologize for. Adeptus hums a hymn that is mostly verbs. Holt carries a list he will pretend is lighter than it is. Margos Solo tells the ship a joke about gravity, and the ship laughs because he lubricated the right place. The sacristan grips the sensor chain and keeps her wrists very firm. He laughs in small. He steps forward. Codex note. By conclave minor fiat under the Palatine seal of terror and the sigillite protocol Chaoshuan El. Anomaly acid pilgrim knife, designate 106, is seconded to the Ordo Sepulturum with silent sisterhood guardianship Operative authority extends to sanctioned covert operations under null escort, with violation penalties enforceable by custodian lien and instant abeyance writ. Epilogue. Opens across 3 rooms and 1 field. A Manufactorum Basilica on Gathalamor repairs his bells. A plaque is answered where the nave broke. It bears no saint's face, only a sentence. We did not sing when ordered not to. Sister Roswin touches the letters and feels her knee ache. Lord Marshal Holt, retired by order and still moving like a man who will never be off duty, nods to the sacristan carrying a bucket. He pretends not to see the way the censer chain has polished her wrist bones, shiny. He is proud and hates it and likes hating it. In a vault under terror, the warden stands alone and watches its corridors clean themselves. It does not sigh. It does not sulk. It turns to a wall labelled Efficiencies Deferred and writes in neat script, Pilgrim knife, integrate when tired. It pauses and adds, or when rope breaks. It is patient. It is an optimization. It will be waiting when men decide they cannot afford to be human for a day. On a plague world no one will tell new maps about. A Death Guard lord named Drudge Sovereign Tefel wakes from being dead to find a fungus writing the old man's grin on his inner eyelids. He laughs so hard his scars pop. He promises to build a scythe out of sterilized iron and cut a wound that cannot rust. His choir claps with gloves on. They plan to take them off. On a parade ground behind a minor orphanage on Orison's Gate, children swing incense as if it were a game. An old woman with a bishop's ring that never fit her right teaches them how to keep their wrists firm. Someone tells a story about a monster who learned to count other people's breaths and spend them well. A child raises her hand and asks if he had a name. The old woman says, "He has a job." The child nods like that is better. Outside, 2 stars line up wrong for a minute, and a pilgrim sees it and invents a prayer. The prayer does nothing and everything. It keeps a hand steady on a wheel. It keeps a door closed when the wrong song comes hunting. He is not there for any of the applause, which is perfect. He is elsewhere, in the dark splice between a corridor and a promise, walking under the null shadow, dragging a culvert where it hurts, counting the condemned as if counting were a way to stay bored enough to be decent. The seal warms, the leash gives, then takes. He grins toward a door he will open when asked. He will close it when told. He will keep one rule he wrote himself and let the others rub him into something like a tool. He has never liked roads. He likes this one enough to keep walking. The sound it makes is rope on wood, wind in a pennant, lungs full of cold. The taste is work. The aftertaste is a little like pride, and he chews it like a sin until it becomes useful.